When a desperate woman asks a dangerous stranger to make her ex-husband jealous, she has no idea she just sealed both their fates. Lena Carter thought the worst night of her life was signing divorce papers. She was wrong. Tonight, watching her ex-husband flash stolen money while his new girlfriend drapes herself across him, Lena realizes rock bottom has a basement. In 60 seconds, she'll make a choice that changes everything. She'll ask a man she's never met to help her pretend she matters. What she doesn't know: Adrian Vale doesn't pretend, and he never does favors for free. This is their story. Stay until the end, hit that like button, and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. Now let's begin. The bass hit like a physical thing, a rhythmic assault that made Lena's ribs vibrate with each pulsing beat. She stood at the edge of the dance floor in Meridian, one of downtown's most notorious clubs. The kind of place where the lighting was deliberately dim, where mistakes felt anonymous, and where broken people came to pretend they weren't falling apart. Lena Carter was very much falling apart. She clutched her second vodka tonic like a lifeline, the condensation making her fingers slip against the glass. The ice had long since melted, diluting the alcohol until it tasted more like regret than anything else. Around her, bodies moved in rhythm, couples grinding against each other, groups of friends laughing too loud, solo dancers lost in their own worlds. Everyone seemed to belong to something, to someone. Everyone except her. "You look like you need another drink." The bartender materialized beside her, a young woman with purple hair and enough piercings to set off a metal detector. Her name tag read Chris. "I need a lot of things," Lena replied, her voice barely audible over the music. "Another drink probably isn't one of them." Chris tilted her head, studying Lena with the knowing look of someone who'd seen every flavor of human misery parade through this club. Bad breakup? Worse. Bad marriage, followed by a bad divorce, followed by a spectacularly bad decision to come here tonight. Lena drained the watery remnants of her drink. "Make it 3 drinks I don't need." The bartender laughed, already reaching for the vodka. "Honey, you're in good company. Half the people here are running from something. The other half are looking for something to run to." She poured with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd made 10,000 identical drinks. "The trick is figuring out which half you belong to." Lena didn't have an answer for that. She'd been an ER nurse at Mercy General for 7 years. 7 years of blood and chaos, of saving lives and losing them, of coffee at 3 a.m. and emotional exhaustion that went bone deep. She was good at her job, great at it, actually. She could intubate in her sleep, could talk down a violent patient with her eyes closed, could read a cardiac monitor like some people read novels. But she couldn't save her own marriage. Marcus, her ex-husband, though the ex still felt strange in her mouth after 8 years of "my husband," had been systematic in his destruction of their life together. Not dramatic, not explosive, just methodical, like he approached everything else. An accountant's precision applied to dismantling a partnership. The affairs came first. 3 that she knew about, probably more that she didn't. Each one a small death, a tiny erosion of the person she thought she was. Then came the financial betrayal, $40,000 siphoned from their joint accounts over 18 months. Money she'd saved from brutal double shifts, from holidays worked while other families celebrated, from every sacrifice she'd made so they could build something together. He'd taken it all. Spent it on restaurants she'd never been to, hotels she'd never slept in, gifts for women whose names she'd never learned. The divorce had been finalized 3 months ago. The judge had ordered Marcus to repay the money, but orders didn't mean much when someone simply ignored them. Her lawyer said they could pursue it further, but that meant more legal fees, more time, more energy she simply didn't have. So she'd been trying to move on, trying to convince herself that survival was the same thing as healing. Tonight was supposed to be part of that process. Her friend Rachel had insisted, practically dragged her out of her apartment after finding Lena eating cereal for dinner for the 5th night in a row, still in her scrubs from a shift that had ended 6 hours earlier. "You need to remember you're alive," Rachel had said, already rifling through Lena's closet for something that wasn't medical adjacent. "You need to remember you're a woman, not just a walking medical degree and a divorce statistic." Rachel had left an hour ago with some guy whose name Lena had already forgotten, leaving her alone with a drink she didn't want in a club she shouldn't have come to. And then she saw him. Marcus. Her ex-husband stood near the VIP section, all arrogant smiles and expensive casual wear that she knew he couldn't actually afford. The woman beside him was young, mid-20s maybe, with the kind of effortless beauty that came from youth and a metabolism that still worked. She laughed at something Marcus said, her hand possessively on his chest, but that wasn't what made Lena's stomach drop. It was the bottle of champagne they were sharing. The same brand Marcus had once told her was too expensive for a random Tuesday. The same champagne he'd refused to buy for their anniversary because they were saving money. Her money. He was spending her stolen money right in front of her without a shred of shame. The vodka turned to acid in her stomach. Marcus hadn't seen her yet. He was too busy playing the successful bachelor, holding court with a small circle of people who probably didn't know he was a fraud wearing a rented personality. The woman laughed again, and Marcus pulled her closer, whispering something that made her blush. 8 years. 8 years of Lena's life distilled down to this moment, watching her ex-husband flaunt a life built on her sacrifice. The rational part of her brain, the part that had gotten her through medical emergencies and impossible diagnoses, told her to leave, to turn around, go home, block his number again, and let karma handle the rest. She didn't need this. Didn't need to torture herself with visual proof of her own irrelevance. But the other part, the part that had been quietly screaming for 3 months, the part that was tired of being reasonable and mature and fine, that part wanted blood. Not literally. She was a nurse, after all. But metaphorically. Absolutely. She wanted him to see her. Wanted him to know she wasn't destroyed. Wanted to shove visual evidence in his face that she had moved on, that she was desirable, that someone else could want what he'd thrown away. The problem was, none of that was true. She hadn't moved on. She'd barely moved at all. And the only person who'd shown interest in her in the past 3 months was the hospital's night security guard, who was at least 60 and possibly married. Lena scanned the club with desperate eyes, looking for, what? A prop? A human shield? Someone she could recruit into her spontaneous theater of lies? That's when she noticed the man at the bar. He sat alone, which was the first unusual thing. In a club like this, attractive people didn't stay solo for long, but he radiated a kind of self-contained calm that seemed to create an invisible barrier around him. Mid-30s, she guessed. Dark hair, tailored black shirt that probably cost more than her car payment, and a face that managed to be both handsome and slightly severe. But it was his stillness that caught her attention. Everyone else in Meridian was in motion, dancing, drinking, shouting over the music. This man sat perfectly still, a glass of what looked like whiskey in front of him, untouched. He wasn't on his phone, wasn't scanning the room for prospects, just present, observing. There was something about him that made her nervous system fire warning signals. Some instinct honed from years in emergency medicine, the same sense that told her when a patient was about to code before the monitors caught up. Dangerous, her hindbrain whispered. Don't. Which is exactly why the self-destructive part of her started walking toward him. She didn't have a plan, didn't have a script. She just knew that Marcus was 50 feet away, and she had maybe 2 minutes before he spotted her, and she refused, absolutely refused, to let him see her alone and diminished and exactly as pathetic as he probably thought she was. The man didn't look up as she approached. Didn't acknowledge her at all, actually, which should have been discouraging, but somehow wasn't. Up close, she could see details the dim lighting had hidden, the precise way his shirt fit, suggesting custom tailoring, the expensive watch that caught the strobing lights, the small scar along his jawline that kept him from being too pretty, and his eyes. When he finally did look at her, his eyes were the color of slate, and they saw everything. Lena's carefully rehearsed opening line, something casual and flirtatious, died in her throat. "You're about to do something reckless," he said. His voice was low, measured, with an accent she couldn't quite place. Not local. Somewhere East Coast, maybe. Educated. "I can see it in the way you're standing. You're either going to ask me for something or you're going to throw that drink in someone's face." She blinked. What? The drink throwing seems more likely, honestly. The corner of his mouth moved, not quite a smile, but an acknowledgement of one. "There's a man near the VIP section. You've been looking at him like he personally insulted your ancestors. Ex-husband? Heat flooded her face. Is it that obvious? Only to someone paying attention. He took a slow sip of his whiskey, still watching her with those unsettling eyes. Most people here aren't. Are you always this direct with strangers? I find it saves time. He set his glass down with deliberate care. So, what were you going to ask me? Lena's mouth went dry. The vodka confidence that had carried her this far suddenly evaporated, leaving only the crushing awareness of how insane this was. She didn't know this man, didn't know anything about him except that he made her feel like a butterfly pinned to a board, specimen and observer locked in uncomfortable intimacy. But Marcus laughed again, that same performative laugh he'd used at dinner parties when he was trying to impress someone. And something in Lena just snapped. Dance with me, she said. The man went very still. Excuse me? I need... She took a breath, forcing the words out before courage failed entirely. My ex-husband is over there, with someone new, spending money he stole from me. And I need him to see that I'm not... She gestured helplessly at herself. I need him to see that someone else wants you? The man's expression hadn't changed, but something shifted in his tone, not mockery, something else. You're asking me to make him jealous. I'm asking you to dance with me, Lena corrected, though they both knew it was the same thing. Just one song, just so he sees, and then you can go back to your whiskey and your mysterious brooding, and I can go home and pretend I didn't just humiliate myself by asking a complete stranger to... All right. She stopped mid-ramble. What? I said all right. He stood, and Lena realized he was taller than she'd thought, easily 6'2", with the kind of build that suggested regular exercise and possibly a personal trainer. One song, but we do it properly. Properly. He held out his hand. If we're going to make your ex-husband regret his life choices, we should probably commit to the performance. Don't you think? Lena stared at his outstretched hand like it might be a trap. Everything about this felt surreal. The pulsing music, the stranger's calm intensity, the way her life had somehow narrowed down to this single decision. Take his hand or don't. Stay invisible or be seen. She took his hand. His grip was warm, firm, and the moment their skin connected, something electric shot up her arm. Not attraction, at least not just attraction. Something else. Recognition, maybe. Like her body knew something her brain hadn't figured out yet. He led her onto the dance floor with the confidence of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. The song shifted. Something slower, more deliberate, with a bass line that felt like a heartbeat. He pulled her close, one hand at the small of her back, the other still holding hers. What's your name? He asked, his mouth close to her ear so she could hear him over the music. Lena. Adrian. He guided her into the rhythm of the dance, and she followed without thinking. You're a nurse, recently divorced, and you came here tonight because a well-meaning friend dragged you out of what was probably a very comfortable depression spiral. She pulled back slightly to look at him. How did you... Small callus on your index finger from writing on medical charts, tan line where a wedding ring used to be, and you're wearing the kind of outfit that someone else picked out for you. It fits, but you keep adjusting it like it doesn't quite feel like yours. His expression remained neutral, but there was something almost amused in his eyes. Am I wrong? That's unsettling. Observant, he corrected. There's a difference. They moved together across the dance floor, and despite everything, despite the insanity of the situation, despite not knowing this man at all, Lena felt herself relaxing into it. He was a good dancer. No, better than good. He led with absolute certainty, each movement precise and controlled, and she found herself following his lead without resistance. He's watching, Adrian said quietly. What? Your ex-husband. He noticed you. He stopped talking to his companion, and he's staring at us. Adrian's hand tightened slightly on her back. Do you want him to keep watching? Did she? A few minutes ago, the answer would have been an unequivocal yes, but now, held close to this stranger who somehow felt less strange by the second, Lena wasn't sure what she wanted anymore. I don't know, she admitted. Then let me make the decision easier. Adrian spun her out and pulled her back in, closer this time, until there was barely any space between them. Pretend I just said something clever. Laugh like you mean it. I don't. Trust me. And God help her, she did. She laughed, letting her head fall back slightly, and Adrian smiled. A real smile this time, not the half acknowledgement from before. It transformed his face entirely, softening the severe edges into something unexpectedly warm. Over his shoulder, Lena caught a glimpse of Marcus. He'd gone rigid, his conversation completely abandoned. The woman beside him was talking, but he wasn't listening. He was watching Lena like he'd just seen a ghost wearing his ex-wife's face. Good, Lena thought viciously. Watch this. She let herself sink into the dance, into the fiction they were creating. Let herself pretend that Adrian was hers, that this was real, that she was the kind of woman who went to clubs and attracted mysterious, dangerous men who looked at her like she mattered. The song shifted into something with a harder edge, more aggressive, and Adrian adjusted accordingly. His hand slid from her back to her hip, possessive in a way that should have felt presumptuous, but somehow didn't. They moved together like they'd done this before, like their bodies already knew each other's rhythm. You're better at this than I expected, Lena said, her lips close to his ear now. At dancing. At the whole performance. You'd think you'd done this before. Something flickered across his face, too quick to read. Maybe I have. Do you make a habit of rescuing sad divorcees in nightclubs? No, he said simply. You're the first. They danced through another song, then another. Somewhere in the transition, Lena forgot why they were doing this. Forgot about Marcus, about the stolen money, about everything except the man holding her and the way he made her feel. Not invisible, not broken, just present. Finally, the music shifted into something faster, more chaotic, and Adrian led her off the dance floor. They ended up in a quieter corner near the back of the club, where the bass was still thunderous, but conversation was at least possible. Thank you, Lena said, suddenly feeling awkward now that they were standing still, no longer touching. You didn't have to do that. I know. Adrian's gaze was steady on her face. You should know. He's coming over here. What? Lena's head snapped around, and sure enough, Marcus was weaving through the crowd toward them, his face tight with an emotion she couldn't quite read. Anger? Jealousy? Both? Lena, Marcus's voice cut through the music, sharp and accusing. What the hell are you doing here? 8 months ago, that tone would have made her apologize reflexively, would have made her explain herself, justify her presence, smooth over his discomfort at her expense. But 8 months ago, she was still trying to save a marriage that was already dead. Marcus. She kept her voice level, controlled. I'm having a drink. Is that illegal now? Don't be cute. He was drunk. She could see it in the looseness of his movements, the slight glaze over his eyes. You're following me. That's pathetic, even for you. Heat flooded her face. I'm not... This is quite the coincidence, though, isn't it? Marcus's gaze shifted to Adrian, sizing him up with undisguised hostility. Lena doesn't do clubs. She's more of a Netflix and early bedtime type. So either she's following me or... His smile turned ugly. You're a hell of a rebound, buddy. Hope you know what you're getting into. She's got a lot of baggage, trust issues. And she's terrible with... That's enough. Adrian's voice wasn't loud, but something in it made Marcus stop mid-sentence. You've said what you came to say. Now leave. Marcus laughed, that same performative sound that had grated on Lena for years. Who the fuck do you think you are? Adrian didn't answer, didn't move, just looked at Marcus with those slate gray eyes that saw everything and forgave nothing. The silence stretched, and Marcus, drunk and angry and probably riding high on his own bravado, took a step forward. I asked you a question. Marcus, don't... Lena started, but Adrian held up a hand, cutting her off gently. You should walk away now, Adrian said, still in that same measured tone. While you still can. Or what? Marcus was practically vibrating with alcohol-fueled aggression now. You're going to fight me? Over her? He jerked his chin toward Lena with contempt that made her flinch. She's not worth it, man. Trust me. I wasted 8 years figuring that out. Adrian's expression didn't change. But something else did. Something subtle enough that Lena almost missed it. The air pressure, maybe. The way the space around them seemed to contract. "I'm going to give you one more chance," Adrian said quietly. "Turn around. Go back to your table. Forget you saw us." "Fuck you." Marcus shoved Adrian's shoulder. Not hard, just enough to be aggressive, to stake his claim to the confrontation. It should have been meaningless. Just two men posturing in a nightclub, the kind of thing that happened 100 times a night in places like this. But Adrian moved. Lena didn't even see how it happened. One moment Marcus was standing there, drunk and belligerent. The next, Adrian had him by the wrist, twisted at an angle that looked casual but made Marcus go completely white. "Let me be very clear," Adrian said, his voice barely above a whisper. "You stole $40,000 from her. You betrayed her for years. And now you have the audacity to speak to her with disrespect?" The grip tightened, and Marcus made a small sound of pain. "You're going to walk away. You're going to spend the rest of your night wondering what just happened, and you're never, never going to speak to her like that again. Do we understand each other?" Marcus nodded frantically, his face twisted in pain and sudden fear. Adrian released him, and Marcus stumbled back, cradling his wrist. For a moment he looked like he might say something, might try to salvage his dignity. But then he saw whatever expression was on Adrian's face, and something in him broke. He turned and practically ran back to his table. Lena stood frozen, her heart hammering against her ribs. Around them the club continued unchanged, people dancing, drinking, living their lives. No one had noticed the small violence that had just occurred, the shift in power that had happened in the space between one song and the next. "You didn't have to do that," she said finally. "Yes," Adrian replied, straightening his shirt collar with deliberate care. "I did. He's going to, I don't know, press charges or something, make trouble." Adrian looked at her, and something in his expression made her words die in her throat. "No, he won't." "How do you know?" "Because men like him only fight battles they know they can win." He gestured toward Marcus's table, where her ex-husband was gathering his things with jerky, agitated movements, clearly preparing to leave. "And he just learned he can't win against me." There was something in the way Adrian said it, not arrogance, just absolute certainty, that made Lena's skin prickle with unease. "Who are you?" she asked. Adrian considered the question for a long moment. Then, instead of answering, he said, "Are you hungry?" "What?" "It's almost midnight. You've had, 2 drinks on an empty stomach?" He tilted his head slightly. "There's a place 3 blocks from here that makes the best banh mi this side of the city. Open until 2 a.m. We could walk there, have a conversation that doesn't involve your ex-husband, and you could decide whether you want to know the answer to that question." Lena knew she should say no. Knew that everything about this man screamed danger in a language her nervous system understood, even if her conscious mind didn't. He'd just threatened Marcus. No, not threatened. Done something worse. Made her ex-husband afraid with nothing but a look and a few quiet words. That wasn't normal. That wasn't safe. But when had safety ever gotten her anything except a broken marriage and an empty apartment? "Okay," she heard herself say, "but I'm buying my own food." Adrian's smile was small but genuine. "If you insist." They left Meridian together, stepping out into the cool night air that felt like a baptism after the club's oppressive heat. Lena's ears rang in the sudden relative quiet, her body still vibrating from the bass that had been pummeling her for the past 2 hours. The street was busy despite the hour, groups of people moving between bars, a few homeless individuals in doorways, the occasional taxi cruising past looking for fares. The city at night had its own rhythm, its own rules. Adrian walked beside her, not touching but close enough that she was aware of him in her peripheral vision. He moved with the same controlled grace he'd shown while dancing, like someone who was always conscious of his body and space, always ready. "You knew about the money," Lena said as they walked. "When I mentioned it before, you didn't seem surprised." "I wasn't." "How?" "I didn't tell you how much." "You told me he stole from you. You told me enough." Adrian glanced at her. "And when I had him by the wrist, I told him the exact amount. He didn't correct me." "You were guessing?" "I was making an educated assessment based on probability and reaction. He navigated around a group of drunk college students with practiced ease. The way you reacted when you saw him with expensive champagne, the bitterness in your voice when you mentioned the money, the specific kind of violation in your expression. He paused. 40,000 is the kind of number that changes a life. Not enough to be immediately devastating, but enough to derail major plans. Student loans, down payment on a house? Both, Lena admitted quietly. I was going to go back to school, get my BSN, maybe eventually become a nurse practitioner, and we were saving for a house. Something small, but ours. She laughed without humor. Turns out the we was just me. He was spending the house fund on hotels with strangers. He's an idiot. He's a thief. That too. Adrian stopped in front of a small storefront with a hand-painted sign in Vietnamese and English. Here. The restaurant was tiny, maybe 6 tables, all occupied despite the hour. The air smelled like lemongrass and grilled pork and fresh herbs. An elderly Vietnamese woman looked up from behind the counter, and her face lit up when she saw Adrian. She said something in rapid Vietnamese, and Adrian responded in kind, his pronunciation flawless. The woman laughed, swatted his arm affectionately, then looked at Lena with frank curiosity. She wants to know if you're my girlfriend, Adrian translated. I told her we just met. What did she say to that? That I work too much and I'm going to die alone if I'm not careful. His expression was wry. She's not wrong. The woman, Mrs. Nguyen, Lena learned, seated them at a small table near the window and brought them tea without asking, already chattering about what they should order. Adrian translated, occasionally interjecting with his own suggestions, and eventually they ended up with enough food for 4 people spread across their small table. You come here often, Lena observed, watching the easy familiarity between Adrian and Mrs. Nguyen. 3-4 times a week, more when I'm working late. He picked up his banh mi with surprising delicacy for a man with his hands. Mrs. Nguyen's husband used to own the place. He passed 2 years ago. She keeps it open because she doesn't know what else to do with herself. That's sad. That's love, Adrian corrected. Same thing sometimes. They ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes. The food was incredible, exactly the kind of perfect that came from decades of practice and genuine care. Lena hadn't realized how hungry she was until the first bite, and then she was eating with the single-minded focus of someone who'd forgotten that food could be pleasure instead of just fuel. You speak Vietnamese, she said finally, and you knew exactly what banh mi I'd like. And Mrs. Nguyen treats you like family, but you have an East Coast accent and… She gestured vaguely at him. Everything else about you says not from here. Very observant. Adrian wiped his hands on a napkin with precise movements. My mother was Vietnamese. My father was American, military contractor, though he hated that term. I grew up all over, Virginia, California, 3 years in Singapore, 2 in Vietnam. Learned to adapt to wherever I was, whoever I needed to be. Needed to be? It's a useful skill, being able to read a room, understand what's expected, become what the situation requires. He met her eyes. You do it too, in your own way. Emergency medicine requires constant adaptation. Every patient, every crisis demands a different version of you. That's… Lena paused, considering. That's actually accurate. I never thought about it like that. Most people don't think about the ways they survive. Adrian's expression was unreadable. They just do it. There was something in the way he said it, something weighted, heavy with implication, that made Lena want to ask more. But before she could, Mrs. Nguyen appeared with more tea and a plate of what looked like fried spring rolls, chattering something in Vietnamese that made Adrian laugh. What did she say? That you need to eat more because you're too skinny, and American men don't appreciate proper women anymore. He pushed the plate toward her. She's very opinionated about American dating culture. Lena took a spring roll, still watching Adrian's face. You didn't answer my question from before. Who are you? I told you, Adrian Vale. That's a name, not an answer. He considered this, his fingers drumming once against the table, the first nervous gesture she'd seen from him. What do you want to know? What you do. Why a man who speaks flawless Vietnamese and dresses like that? She nodded at his obviously expensive clothes. Comes to dance clubs alone on a Thursday night. Why you knew exactly how to make my ex-husband afraid with just a few words. Why? She gestured helplessly. All of it. Any of it. Adrian was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, I solve problems. That's vague. It's accurate. He met her eyes directly. People come to me when they have problems that conventional solutions can't fix. Legal issues, business disputes, situations that require discretion. I facilitate resolutions. Like a lawyer? Not exactly. Like what then? A fixer? The corner of his mouth moved, that almost smile again. That's closer. Lena felt something cold settle in her stomach. Is that legal? Is that really what you want to ask? No, it wasn't. What she wanted to ask was why he'd helped her, why he was sitting here in this tiny restaurant, having this conversation with a divorced ER nurse who'd thrown herself at him in a moment of desperate stupidity. But she was afraid of the answer. I should go, she said instead, reaching for her purse. Thank you for dinner and for helping me with Marcus, but I don't think… Lena. He didn't reach for her, didn't try to stop her physically, just said her name, and somehow that was enough to make her pause. I'm not going to hurt you. I'm not going to involve you in anything you don't want to be involved in. I'm just a man who had a drink at a club, who danced with a beautiful woman, and who is now enjoying a meal with her. That's all this has to be. But it could be more. Yes. The honesty of it hit her like a physical thing. No games, no manipulation, just acknowledgement of the thing hanging between them, electric and dangerous. I don't do this, Lena said, hating how her voice shook. I don't go home with strangers. I don't let mysterious men buy me dinner. I barely go out at all anymore. I work. I go home. I sleep. I repeat. That's my life. That's all my life is. I know. Then why? Because you deserve better than that. Adrian's voice was gentle but firm. You deserve to be more than the worst thing that happened to you. And when you walked up to me tonight, you weren't looking for safety. You were looking for proof that you still exist, that you still matter. He paused. I'm offering to show you that you do. Lena's throat felt tight. By doing what? Whatever you want. He pushed a business card across the table, heavy stock embossed lettering that just read Adrian Vale and a phone number. Take this. Think about whether you want to see me again. If you do, call. If you don't, throw it away, and we'll both go back to our separate lives. No pressure, no expectations. She stared at the card like it might bite her. And if I call? Then we'll have dinner. Somewhere nicer than this, though Mrs. Nguyen would be offended if she heard me say that. We'll talk. I'll answer your questions honestly, and you can decide whether you want to keep going or walk away. That simple? That's simple. It wasn't, though. Nothing about this man was simple. Everything about him screamed complexity, danger, secrets that could swallow her whole if she wasn't careful. But Lena was so tired of being careful. She picked up the card, felt the weight of it in her palm. Heavy, expensive, real. Okay, she said. I'll think about it. Adrian's smile was small but genuine. That's all I ask. They finished their meal in quieter conversation. Easier topics, safer ground. He told her about Mrs. Nguyen's grandson who was studying engineering at the state university. She told him about the hospital's new trauma protocol and the administrative nightmare it had created. Normal things. Human things. When they left, Adrian insisted on calling her a car despite her protests. It's late, he said simply, and I'd like to know you got home safely. The car arrived. A sleek black sedan that was definitely not a regular Uber. The driver nodded at Adrian with the kind of deference that suggested they knew each other, had worked together before. Lena, Adrian said as she reached for the door handle, what happened tonight with your ex-husband, the money he stole? Has he paid any of it back? No, the court ordered him to, but he just hasn't. My lawyer says we can pursue it, but don't. Adrian's voice was firm. Don't do anything. Not yet. Why? Just trust me. Give it a few days. She wanted to ask what he meant, but something in his expression told her she wouldn't get an answer. Not tonight, anyway. Okay, she said instead. A few days. She slid into the car and Adrian closed the door behind her with careful precision. Through the window, she watched him step back onto the curb, hands in his pockets, face unreadable in the streetlight's glow. The driver pulled away, and Lena twisted in her seat to watch Adrian until he disappeared from view, swallowed by the city's darkness. Her apartment was exactly as she'd left it, small, clean, achingly empty. She dropped her purse on the counter, kicked off the heels Rachel had forced on her, and stood in the middle of her living room feeling like she'd just woken from a very strange dream. Except the business card in her hand was real. The memory of Adrian's eyes was real. The way Marcus had looked at them, afraid and furious and diminished, was very, very real. Lena pulled out her phone, found Rachel's contact. "You won't believe what just happened." The response came immediately, despite the hour. "Did you finally go home with someone?" "Please tell me you went home with someone." "No." "Better." "Worse?" "I don't know. Call me tomorrow?" "First thing. Can't wait. Proud of you for staying out past 10. Lena smiled despite everything and set her phone down. She should sleep, had a shift in 8 hours. Should shower, do her nighttime routine, fall into bed, and hope tomorrow made more sense than tonight had. Instead, she stood at her window looking out at the city lights, turning Adrian's card over and over in her hands, and wondered what the hell she'd just started. 3 blocks away, in the back of another car heading in the opposite direction, Adrian Vale made a phone call. "It's me," he said when someone answered. "I need you to look into someone. Marcus Carter, recently divorced, accountant, I think, works somewhere downtown." He paused, listening. "No, nothing violent, just information. Bank accounts, assets, where the money went, everything." Another pause. "And find out who he hired for the divorce. I want to know if his lawyer's clean." He ended the call and stared out at the passing city, thinking about Lena's face when she'd asked him to dance. The vulnerability there. The quiet courage it had taken to approach a stranger and ask for help. She had no idea what she'd just walked into. But he'd meant what he said. He would answer her questions honestly, would show her his world if she wanted to see it, would give her every opportunity to walk away before she got too deep. He just had a feeling she wouldn't, and that made her either very brave or very foolish. Possibly both. The night swallowed the car's taillights as it merged into traffic, carrying Adrian toward whatever came next. Behind him, the club still pulsed with music and movement, 100 small dramas playing out under the strobing lights. But none of them mattered anymore. The only story that mattered now was the one that had started with a desperate woman, a dangerous stranger, and a single dance. Everything else was just prologue. Lena didn't call. For 3 days, Adrian's business card sat on her kitchen counter like a small white rectangle of accusation. She walked past it every morning on her way to work, every evening when she came home exhausted and smelling like antiseptic. Each time she told herself she'd throw it away. Each time she didn't. The problem was Marcus. Or rather, the problem was what happened to Marcus. 2 days after that night at Meridian, Lena received a text from an unknown number at 6 in the morning, right as she was finishing a brutal overnight shift. Her hands were still shaking from the coding patient they'd lost 20 minutes earlier, a 53-year-old man who'd come in with chest pain and crashed before they could get him stabilized. They'd worked on him for 40 minutes. It hadn't been enough. The text was simple. Check your bank account. Lena almost deleted it as spam. Would have, except something made her open her banking app instead, squinting at the screen in the hospital parking lot as dawn broke gray and cold over the city. Her checking account showed the same depressing balance it had for months. But her savings account, the one she'd stopped looking at because seeing the emptiness hurt too much, had a new deposit. $40,000. Lena's hands went numb. She refreshed the app 3 times, convinced it was a glitch, a mistake, some kind of fraud that would be reversed the moment she acknowledged it. But the number stayed solid, real, impossible. The deposit memo read, "Restitution, M. Carter." Her phone rang. Unknown number. The same one that had texted her. She answered without thinking. "Hello?" "Good morning." Adrian's voice was calm, unhurried, like he hadn't just upended her entire reality. "I apologize for the early call. I wanted to make sure you saw it before you started worrying." "What did you do?" Lena's voice came out strangled. Around her, the parking lot was filling with the morning shift, nurses and doctors trudging toward another day of organized chaos. Normal people doing normal things. Adrian, what the hell did you do? I had a conversation with your ex-husband. He decided it was in his best interest to return what he took from you. A conversation. She laughed, high and brittle. You had a conversation and he just gave back $40,000? Just like that? Just like that. That's not... People don't just... She pressed her free hand against her forehead, trying to organize thoughts that kept scattering like frightened birds. What did you say to him? I explained that he had a choice. He could return the money voluntarily, or I could make his life significantly more complicated. He chose wisely. Did you threaten him? I presented him with facts about his situation. What he chose to hear as a threat is his own interpretation. Lena's stomach twisted. She should be grateful, should be relieved. $40,000, her future, her plans, everything Marcus had stolen, just handed back like it was nothing. But all she felt was a creeping unease that made her skin prickle. I didn't ask you to do this, she said quietly. I know. I didn't want you to do this. Didn't you? Adrian's voice was gentle, but there was steel underneath. You told me what he did. You told me how much he took. You said your lawyer couldn't help, that the court order meant nothing. What did you think would happen? I thought you'd just be someone I met, someone I had dinner with, not someone who would... She stopped, not sure how to finish that sentence. Someone who would fix it? Adrian supplied. That's what I do, Lena. You knew that when you took my card. Knowing and understanding are different things. Yes, they are. He paused and she could hear traffic in the background, the sound of a city waking up. Are you angry? Was she? Lena examined the feeling churning in her chest, trying to separate gratitude from violation, relief from fear. I don't know what I am. That's fair. Adrian's tone shifted, became almost businesslike. The money is yours. There are no strings attached. Marcus won't contest it or try to get it back. Your lawyer will receive documentation this morning showing it was a voluntary restitution. Everything is legal and clean. How is any of this legal? Because I made sure it was. He said it like it was simple, obvious. I don't operate outside the law, Lena. I just understand it better than most people. Marcus signed paperwork, filed the transfer properly, acknowledged his debt. All of it completely legitimate. And if he hadn't wanted to? Silence. Long enough that Lena understood the answer even before Adrian spoke. Then I would have found another way to convince him. But we didn't need to go there. The unspoken threat hung between them, heavy and undeniable. This man, this stranger she'd danced with, shared a meal with, started to like, was capable of things she couldn't even imagine. Things that made Marcus, for all his flaws, comply without hesitation. I need to go, Lena said abruptly. I need to think. Of course. No pressure in his voice, no manipulation, just acceptance. When you're ready to talk, you have my number. What if I'm never ready? Then I'll remember you as the woman who asked me to dance, and I'll hope you use that money to build the life you deserve. He paused. But I think you'll call. Why? Because you're curious, because part of you wants to know what happens next, and because you're braver than you think you are. His voice softened. Take care of yourself, Lena. He hung up before she could respond. Lena sat in her car for another 20 minutes, staring at her phone, at the banking app, at the impossible number that represented her future being handed back to her like a lost wallet. She should call her lawyer, should verify this was real, should do 100 practical things. Instead, she called Rachel. It's 7 a.m. on a Saturday, Rachel groaned into the phone. Someone better be dead. He gave me the money back. What? Who? Lena, you're not making sense. Marcus, the $40,000. It's in my account. He just gave it back. Lena's voice cracked. And I think the man from the club made him do it. Rachel was silent for a beat. Then, I'm coming over. Don't move. She arrived 45 minutes later with coffee and bagels, taking one look at Lena's face before pulling her into a hug that made something in Lena's chest finally crack open. They sat on the couch, the same couch where Lena had eaten cereal for dinner and cried through bad television for 3 months, And Lena told her everything. The dance, Adrian, the restaurant, the business card, the money, all of it. Rachel listened without interrupting, which was unusual for her. When Lena finally ran out of words, Rachel took a long sip of her coffee and said, "Okay, so you accidentally seduced a dangerous criminal who's obsessed with you and might be in love with you. Cool, 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 cool. He's not... I didn't seduce anyone, and he's not a criminal. Lena, honey, he made your ex-husband return $40,000 in 3 days. That's not normal. That's not legal advice and clever paperwork. That's power. He said it was all legal. I'm sure it was, technically." Rachel set down her coffee and turned to face Lena directly. "The question isn't whether he broke the law. The question is what kind of man can make someone comply like that, and whether you want to be involved with whatever the answer is. I'm not involved with him. Yet. I'm not going to be." Rachel just looked at her. "You're still carrying his card around, aren't you?" Lena didn't answer, which was answer enough. "Look," Rachel said, gentler now, "I'm not going to tell you what to do. You're a grown woman who's had a shit year, and if you want to have a wild affair with a mysterious, possibly criminal man who solves your problems like some kind of demented fairy godfather, that's your choice. But be honest with yourself about what this is." "What do you think it is?" "I think you asked a stranger for help when you were at your lowest, and I think he helped you in a way that's either incredibly romantic or deeply concerning, and you haven't figured out which yet." Rachel squeezed her hand. "Just be careful. Men who can do what he did, they don't do it for free, even if they say they do." The word stayed with Lena through the rest of the weekend. She verified the money was real, called her bank, talked to her lawyer who confirmed that yes, Marcus had filed the appropriate paperwork, yes, it was legitimate restitution, yes, she should probably just accept it and move on. But moving on required knowing what she was moving toward. Sunday night, she picked up Adrian's card for the 100th time, turned it over in her hands, traced the embossed letters with her thumb, and called. He answered on the second ring. "Lena." Just her name, but the way he said it made her stomach flip. Like he'd been waiting, like he'd known she would call. "I want to have dinner," she said before she could change her mind. "Somewhere public, somewhere we can talk, and I want answers." "When?" "Tomorrow. After my shift, 7 o'clock. I'll send a car." "No." Lena's voice was firm. "I'll meet you there. I'll drive myself. Tell me where." A pause, then, "Marcello's, downtown. Do you know it?" She did. It was expensive, the kind of place where reservations required weeks of notice and the wine list had its own sommelier, not somewhere an ER nurse went on her own dime. "I'll be there at 7, she said. "Lena." Adrian's voice stopped her before she could hang up. "Thank you for calling. Don't thank me yet. I might just be coming to tell you to leave me alone." "That's your right." He sounded almost amused. "I'll see you tomorrow." Marcello's was exactly as intimidating as Lena remembered from the one time she and Marcus had gone for their anniversary 5 years ago. All white tablecloths and soft lighting and the kind of hushed elegance that made her acutely aware of her department store dress and practical shoes. The maitre d' took one look at her, and his professional smile dimmed slightly. "Do you have a reservation?" "I'm meeting someone." "Adrian Vale?" The transformation was immediate. The smile became genuine, warm, almost deferential. "Of course. Mr. Vale is already seated. Please, follow me." He led her through the restaurant to a private corner table, the kind of spot that wasn't on the floor plan that you had to know to ask for. Adrian stood as she approached, and Lena's breath caught despite herself. He wore a suit this time, charcoal gray, perfectly tailored, with a dark blue shirt that brought out the gray in his eyes. He looked like he belonged here, in this world of quiet wealth and unspoken power. Looked like someone who could buy this restaurant without checking his bank balance. "Lena." He pulled out her chair, and she sat, hyper-aware of the other diners pretending not to watch them. "You look beautiful." "I look like I just finished a 12-hour shift in the ER. As I said, beautiful." He returned to his own seat with fluid grace. "Long day?" A kid came in with a peanut allergy reaction. Mother didn't have an EpiPen, didn't know how to use one, panicked, and drove him here instead of calling an ambulance. His throat was closing by the time they got to us. Lena accepted a menu from the hovering waiter without looking at it. We got him stabilized. He'll be fine. But it was close. You saved his life. I did my job. She finally looked at the menu and felt her eyes widen at the prices. Adrian, this is my invitation, my choice of venue, my expense. He said it matter-of-factly, brooking no argument. Order whatever you want. The ossobuco is excellent if you're interested in a recommendation. The waiter appeared and Adrian ordered wine without asking her preference, but somehow chose exactly what she would have picked if she'd known the first thing about Italian wines. They ordered food, and then they were alone again, separated only by white linen and the questions Lena had been carrying for 3 days. Okay, she said, folding her hands on the table. I want to know what you did. Specifically. Not vague answers about having conversations. I want to know how you made Marcus give me that money. Adrian regarded her steadily. Are you sure? Yes. Because once I tell you, you can't unhear it. You'll know exactly what I'm capable of, and that knowledge will change how you see me. I already know you're capable of things that scare me, Lena said. I'm here anyway, so tell me the truth. He was quiet for a moment, his fingers drumming once against the table. Then he leaned back slightly and began to speak. I had someone run a full financial background on your ex-husband. It took approximately 6 hours. Marcus is not a sophisticated criminal. He's an accountant who got lazy and greedy. He took your money and spent it, but he didn't hide it well. Expensive restaurants, hotels, gifts for various women, a new car he registered in his name. I know all that. What you didn't know is that he was also embezzling from his employer. Small amounts over 2 years, about 60,000 total. He thought he was being clever, moving it through various accounts, but the trail was obvious to anyone who knew where to look. Lena felt cold spread through her chest. You're saying Marcus is a thief? Yes, a clumsy one. Adrian's expression was neutral, clinical. I approached him at his office on Friday morning, told him I represented someone who had become aware of his extracurricular activities, presented him with documentation of the embezzlement, explained that I could make this information available to his employer, the police, and the state accounting board. Or he could make restitution to you immediately, sign the appropriate paperwork, and I would forget what I'd found. That's blackmail. That's offering someone a choice between consequences they've earned. Adrian's tone didn't change. I didn't fabricate evidence. I didn't lie to him. I simply made him aware that his actions had caught someone's attention and gave him an option to mitigate the damage. And the embezzlement? Did you report it? No. Why not? Because my objective was to help you, not to destroy him. Marcus gave you the money. He signed the documents. He understood that if he ever approaches you again, if he ever tries to contest the restitution or make your life difficult, those documents will resurface. Adrian paused. He's terrified of you now, or rather, of whoever might be watching you. That fear will keep him honest. The wine arrived, and Adrian tasted it with the automatic precision of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. The sommelier poured for both of them and disappeared. Lena took a long drink, needing something to steady her hands. So you found dirt on him and threatened to expose it unless he paid me back. Essentially. And if he hadn't stolen from his company? If there had been nothing to find? Adrian met her eyes directly. Then I would have found another way. What way? Do you really want to know? No. She didn't. Because the answer would make this real, would confirm what she already suspected, that Adrian existed in a world where problems got solved through methods she couldn't afford to examine too closely. You're right, she said quietly. I don't think I do. I'm not a good man, Lena. Adrian's voice was soft but firm. I want you to understand that. I operate in gray areas that most people don't even know exist. I solve problems for people who can't solve them themselves, and sometimes the solutions aren't pretty. But I have rules. I don't hurt innocent people. I don't create victims, and I don't lie to the people I care about. You barely know me. That doesn't make it less true. Their food arrived, perfectly prepared, artfully presented, the kind of meal that should have been savored. Lena picked at hers, her appetite destroyed by the conversation. Why me? She asked after a long silence. Why did you help me? And don't say it's because I asked you to dance. There were probably a dozen other women in that club who would have approached you if I hadn't. Yes, but none of them were you. That's not an answer. Adrian set down his fork and leaned forward slightly. Do you know what I saw when you walked up to me that night? I saw someone who was drowning but still fighting. Someone who'd been broken but refused to stay broken. You were terrified. I could see it in your hands, in the way you kept adjusting your dress, but you asked anyway. That takes courage most people don't have. Or stupidity. Sometimes they're the same thing. His slight smile faded. I helped you because I wanted to, because I could. And because when you looked at me, you didn't see what most people see. What do most people see? Someone to be afraid of, someone to use, someone who can open doors they can't open themselves. He paused. You just saw a man who might help you reclaim a piece of your dignity. That's rare. Lena absorbed this, turning it over in her mind. And now? What do you see when you look at me now? Someone I'd like to know better, if you'll let me. This isn't normal, Adrian. Adrian, you know that, right? This whole thing, the money, this dinner, you. None of this is how normal people meet and date. No, he agreed. It's not. But we're not normal people, are we? I'm an ER nurse from a broken marriage who eats cereal for dinner and hasn't been on a real date in 2 years. I'm extremely normal. You save lives for a living. You work impossible hours in impossible conditions for inadequate pay because you believe it matters. You've been betrayed and stolen from, and instead of becoming bitter, you're here, giving the world another chance. Adrian's gaze was intense. That's not normal. That's exceptional. The compliment landed somewhere in her chest, warm and uncomfortable. Lena wasn't used to being seen this way, not as broken or pitiful or in need of rescue, but as strong, as someone who'd survived and kept going. I don't know how to do this, she admitted. Whatever this is, I don't know the rules. There are no rules, just choices. Adrian reached across the table, not quite touching her hand, but close enough that she could feel the warmth of his skin. You can walk away right now, thank me for the dinner, delete my number, and go back to your life. Or you can stay. Let me take you somewhere else tonight. Somewhere quieter where we can actually talk without performing for an audience. See if you still want to run when you know more about who I really am. Lena's heart hammered. Where? My place. I live about 20 minutes from here, top floor of the Meridian Towers. He must have seen something in her expression because he added quickly, just to talk. I'm not expecting anything else. There's no pressure, no agenda. Just conversation between two people trying to figure out if they want the same things. Every instinct told her to say no. To take the easy exit he was offering. Go home to her safe apartment and her safe life where the most dangerous thing was a combative patient or a medication error. But she'd been safe for 3 months, and it had gotten her nowhere except alone in the dark. Okay, she heard herself say. Show me. Adrian's apartment was everything Lena expected and nothing like she'd imagined. The space was modern, minimalist, with floor-to-ceiling windows that showed the city sprawling below like a circuit board of light and shadow. Expensive furniture arranged with precision, art on the walls that probably cost more than her annual salary. But it was also lived in. Books stacked on the coffee table, fiction and biography, and dense tomes on international law. A coffee mug with a faded university logo sitting on the kitchen counter. A jacket thrown over the back of a chair. Evidence of a life, not just a showroom. This is... Lena trailed off, not sure how to finish. Excessive? Adrian supplied, shrugging out of his suit jacket. It is, but I'm rarely here, so the space doesn't feel as wasteful as it probably should. Where are you usually? Working, traveling, solving other people's problems. He moved to the kitchen and started making coffee without asking if she wanted any. I bought this place 5 years ago as an investment. Thought I'd sell it and move to something smaller, but I never got around to it. Lena moved to the windows, drawn by the view. From this height, the city looked almost peaceful. The chaos and noise distilled down to lights and patterns. She could see the hospital where she worked, a few miles east. Could trace the route she drove every day, the same street she'd walked for years without really seeing them. It's beautiful, she said quietly. Adrian appeared beside her with 2 mugs of coffee. It's different from up here, easier to see the patterns when you're not in the middle of them. They stood in silence for a moment, drinking coffee and watching the city breathe. Then Adrian said, "Ask me." "Ask you what?" "Whatever you've been trying to ask since dinner. I can see it in your face. There's something you want to know, but you're afraid of how I'll answer." Lena took a breath. "Are you dangerous?" "Yes." The honesty of it hit like a slap. No equivocation, no softening. "Have you hurt people?" "Yes." "Killed anyone?" Adrian was quiet for a long moment. Then, "I've been in situations where violence was necessary, where it was a choice between someone else's life and mine, or between protecting an innocent person and allowing harm. I've made those choices when I had to. But I'm not a killer, Lena. I don't take lives casually or for profit. I'm not a monster. Just dangerous." "Just dangerous," he confirmed. "But not to you. Never to you." She wanted to believe him, wanted to trust the quiet certainty in his voice. But trust had gotten her 8 years of lies and a stolen future. "How do I know that?" she asked. "How do I know you won't hurt me?" "You don't." Adrian set down his coffee and turned to face her fully. "You can't know. Trust isn't about certainty. It's about choosing to be vulnerable anyway. All I can do is promise you honesty. I will never lie to you. I will never manipulate you. And if you ask me to walk away, I will." "Just like that?" "Just like that." Lena studied his face, looking for the lie, the crack in the facade. But all she saw was the same quiet intensity that had arrested her attention in that club. The sense of someone who knew exactly who they were and didn't apologize for it. "Tell me something true," she said. "Something you don't tell other people." Adrian considered this. Then he said, "I'm alone most of the time. Not lonely, alone. There's a difference. I have colleagues, associates, people who owe me favors or who I've helped. But I don't have friends. Don't have people I trust with anything that matters. It's safer that way, for them and for me." "That sounds lonely." "It is." His smile was sad, brief. "But it's also necessary. The work I do, the problems I solve, they create enemies. People who would use anyone close to me as leverage, so I keep distance, keep myself separate." "Then why risk it with me?" "Because sometimes the safe choice is also the wrong one." Adrian reached out, his fingers brushing her jawline with feather-light pressure. "Because you make me want to take risks I've spent years avoiding." Lena's breath caught. She should step back, should maintain distance, keep her head clear. But his touch was gentle, asking rather than demanding, and she found herself leaning into it instead. "I'm scared," she admitted. "Of me? Of this. Of what it might mean, of getting hurt again." "Then we'll go slow." Adrian's hand dropped, giving her space. "There's no timeline here, Lena. No expectations. We can take this at whatever pace feels right to you. If that means just talking for now, that's enough." "And if I want more than talking?" The air between them shifted, became charged. Adrian's eyes darkened slightly. "Then we'll figure that out together." Lena made a choice, maybe reckless, maybe brave. She closed the distance between them and kissed him. For a heartbeat, he didn't respond. Went absolutely still like he was afraid to move. Then his hands came up to cup her face, gentle but certain, and he kissed her back like she was something precious he'd been waiting for without knowing it. It wasn't the desperate, performative kiss they'd faked at the club. This was real. Slow and deep and full of promise. His lips moved against hers with patient hunger, taking time to learn what made her sigh, what made her press closer. When they finally broke apart, both breathing harder, Adrian rested his forehead against hers. "Are you sure?" "No," Lena said honestly, "but I'm doing it anyway." He laughed, a real laugh this time, surprised and genuine. "That might be the bravest thing I've heard all week." They moved to the couch, and Lena found herself curled against Adrian's side, her head on his shoulder, talking about everything and nothing. He told her about growing up between cultures, never quite belonging anywhere. She told him about choosing nursing school because she wanted to fix things, to make people whole. My mother died when I was 16, Adrian said quietly. Cancer. It was fast. Diagnosis to funeral in 4 months. My father never recovered. He died 2 years later. Heart attack, officially. But really, he just stopped wanting to be alive without her. I'm sorry. It taught me that love can be dangerous, that giving someone that much power over your happiness is a weapon they can use against you, even unintentionally. He paused. I've spent my adult life avoiding that vulnerability. Until now? Until now, he agreed, which should probably terrify me more than it does. Hours passed. The city lights shifted as traffic patterns changed, as bars closed and late shift workers headed home. They talked until Lena's words started to blur with exhaustion, until she was fighting to keep her eyes open. I should go, she murmured, not moving. You should sleep. Adrian's voice was gentle. Guest room is down the hall. Stay. I'll drive you home in the morning. She should insist on leaving, should maintain boundaries, but she was so tired and his shoulder was comfortable, and the thought of driving across the city to her empty apartment felt impossible. Okay, she said. Just for tonight. Adrian helped her to the guest room, immaculate, impersonal, with sheets that probably cost more than her couch. He found her a shirt to sleep in, pointed out the bathroom, and then paused at the door. Lena? Yeah? I meant what I said, about being honest with you. If you ever have questions, ever need to know something, ask. I'll tell you the truth even if it's uncomfortable. Why? Because you deserve it, and because I'm tired of living in a world where everyone lies. He left her alone with that promise, closing the door quietly behind him. Lena changed into his shirt, soft cotton that smelled like his cologne, and slid between sheets that felt like clouds. She should be anxious, should be second-guessing every choice that had led her here, to a stranger's apartment, to a situation she couldn't control. Instead, she felt safe, and that scared her more than anything else. Morning came too early, pale sunlight slicing through unfamiliar curtains. Lena woke disoriented, her body registering the expensive sheets and the faint smell of coffee before her brain caught up with where she was. She sat up slowly, Adrian's shirt twisted around her waist, her hair a disaster, and let the reality settle over her like cold water. She'd spent the night at his apartment, had kissed him, had let herself fall asleep feeling safe in a stranger's home. The rational part of her brain, the nurse who assessed risk and made life or death decisions, was screaming warnings, but the rest of her, the part that had been numb for months, felt awake for the first time in longer than she could remember. She found Adrian in the kitchen, already dressed in dark jeans and a charcoal sweater, reading something on his tablet while nursing a cup of coffee. He looked up when she appeared, and his expression softened in a way that made her chest tight. Good morning, he said, his voice still rough with sleep. Coffee. Please. Lena slid onto one of the bar stools, hyper-aware that she was wearing nothing but his shirt and her underwear from yesterday. What time is it? Just after 8. He poured her a cup, added cream without asking, somehow knowing exactly how she took it. You don't have to work today? Not until tomorrow night, overnight shift. She wrapped her hands around the warm mug. You? I have a meeting at noon. Nothing urgent? Adrian set his tablet aside and studied her face. How are you feeling? Honestly, confused, scared, also weirdly okay with both of those things. Lena took a long sip of coffee, needing the caffeine to organize her thoughts. This is all happening very fast. It is. He didn't try to argue or minimize it. We can slow down. Take a step back if you need to. Do you want to slow down? No. The honesty in that single word made her stomach flip. But what I want isn't the only thing that matters here. They sat in silence for a moment, the morning sounds of the city filtering up from far below. Then Lena said, I need to understand your world. The real version, not the sanitized one. If we're going to do this, whatever this is, I need to know what I'm walking into. Adrian's expression went carefully neutral. That's a dangerous conversation. I'm a big girl. I can handle it. Can you? He set down his coffee cup with deliberate precision. Because once you know certain things, you can't unknow them. You'll be implicated just by knowing. That's not something I take lightly. Then help me understand what that means. Lena leaned forward, holding his gaze. You said you solve problems. What kind of problems? Who are your clients? What does a normal day look like for you? Adrian was quiet for a long moment, weighing something she couldn't see. Then he stood, moved to the window, and spoke with his back to her. Most of my clients are legitimate business people who find themselves in situations that conventional solutions can't fix. A CEO whose competitor is using illegal tactics to destroy their company. A family who needs to extract a relative from a dangerous situation overseas. People who've been wronged by someone powerful enough that the legal system won't touch them. He paused. I provide leverage, information, sometimes direct intervention. You make their problems disappear. I make them manageable. He turned to face her. I'm not a miracle worker, Lena. I'm just very good at finding pressure points and applying the right amount of force to get results. Like you did with Marcus. Exactly like that. Though your ex-husband was embarrassingly easy, most of my work is significantly more complex. Lena absorbed this, trying to reconcile the man who'd held her gently last night with someone who operated in shadows and leverage. Have you ever failed? Had a problem you couldn't solve? Something flickered across Adrian's face, pain, quickly masked. Once, 3 years ago, a young woman came to me, said her husband was abusing her, had money, connections, a very expensive lawyer. She'd tried to leave twice and he'd dragged her back through custody threats and financial manipulation. She wanted help disappearing, starting over somewhere he couldn't find her. What happened? I was building a case, gathering evidence, documenting everything, creating a new identity for her. It takes time to do it right, to make sure someone truly vanishes. His voice went flat. I told her to wait 2 more weeks, to stay, pretend nothing had changed, and trust me to handle it. The silence stretched heavy between them. She didn't wait, Lena said quietly. She tried to leave on her own. He caught her packing. Neighbors called the police when they heard screaming. Adrian's hands clenched at his sides. She survived, barely. Traumatic brain injury, broken ribs, collapsed lung. Last I heard, she's in a care facility. Can't speak, can't walk. And he's still free because she can't testify, and I didn't move fast enough to protect her. That's not your fault. Isn't it? I told her to wait. I prioritized doing things cleanly, legally, by the book, and it cost her everything. He looked at Lena directly. That's when I learned that sometimes clean solutions come too late. Sometimes you have to be willing to get your hands dirty to actually help people. The weight of that confession hung in the air. Lena understood what he was really saying, that the man standing before her had made choices, crossed lines, done things that couldn't be undone, because waiting for the right way meant people got hurt. What would you do differently, she asked, if you could go back? I would have gotten her out that night. Legality be damned. I would have made him afraid enough that he never touched her again. Adrian's voice was cold, controlled fury. I would have solved the problem instead of managing it. And now? Is that how you operate? Now I assess each situation on its own terms. Some problems require patience and documentation. Others require immediate action. I've learned to tell the difference. He moved back to the counter, picked up his coffee. But I never again tell someone to wait if I think they're in immediate danger, even if it means doing things that keep me up at night. Lena processed this, understanding crystallizing in her chest. You're telling me this so I'll know what kind of person you are, so I can make an informed choice about whether to stay or go. Yes. Do you want me to go? No. The single word was fierce, stripped of his usual control. I want you to stay. I want to keep talking to you, keep learning what makes you smile, keep finding excuses to see you. But I won't lie about who I am to make that happen. She stood, moved around the counter until she was close enough to touch him. I worked a sexual assault case last month. Young woman, barely 20, her attacker was arrested, released on bail, and showed up at her apartment 3 days later. She came to the ER with a broken jaw and cigarette burns on her arms. He's still out on bail, will probably plead down to something minimal, serve 2 years if he's unlucky. Adrian's jaw tightened, but he didn't interrupt. I see people destroyed by systems that should protect them every single day, Lena continued. I see justice delayed and denied and perverted. I see victims who never recover because the people who hurt them face no real consequences. So when you tell me you solve problems that conventional solutions can't fix, she reached up, touched his face gently. I understand why that's necessary. Maybe I shouldn't. Maybe that makes me complicit or naive or dangerous. But I do. You're not naive. Adrian's hand came up to cover hers. You're practical. There's a difference. My friend Rachel thinks you're a criminal who's going to break my heart. Your friend Rachel is probably right on at least one of those counts. Which one? I'll let you guess. His smile was brief, sad. But she's right to worry about you. Getting involved with me means accepting risks most people never have to consider. It means wondering if the person following you is just a coincidence or something more. It means knowing that my enemies could become yours. Do you have many enemies? Enough. He said it casually, like discussing the weather. People whose problems I solved in ways that hurt them. Competitors who don't like that I'm better at this than they are. A few government agencies in various countries who find me inconvenient. Lena laughed despite herself. You're trying to scare me away. I'm trying to be honest. I know. She stepped back, suddenly needing space to think clearly. I should go home. Shower, change, pretend to be a normal person for a while. Process all of this. I'll drive you. You don't have to. I want to. Adrian was already grabbing his keys. And I'd like to see where you live, if that's okay. It should feel invasive, too intimate, too fast. Instead, Lena found herself nodding. Okay, but I'm warning you now, my apartment is nothing like this. No view, no designer furniture, probably dishes in the sink from 3 days ago. Perfect. The drive to her place was quiet, comfortable. Adrian drove with the same controlled precision he did everything else, navigating traffic like he'd memorized every possible route. When they pulled up to her building, a squat, generic complex that had seen better decades, he didn't comment on the peeling paint or the chain-link fence around the parking lot. Lena's apartment was exactly as embarrassing as she'd promised. Small, cluttered with medical journals and half-finished projects, evidence of someone who spent most of their life at work. But Adrian looked around like he was seeing something interesting rather than depressing. This is very you, he said, picking up a framed photo from her bookshelf. It showed a younger Lena at her nursing school graduation, flanked by her parents, all of them beaming. What does that mean? Practical, efficient, but with small touches of warmth. He gestured at the throw blanket on the couch, the plant struggling valiantly on the windowsill. You care about spaces being lived in, not just functional. That's a very generous interpretation of I don't have time to decorate. Adrian smiled and set the photo down carefully. When can I see you again? The directness of it made her heart stutter. I work tomorrow night, then I'm off for 3 days. Dinner on Wednesday. I'll cook. You cook? I have many hidden talents. His expression was teasing, lighter than she'd seen before. Say yes. Yes. The word came easily, naturally. But Adrian, if we're doing this, really doing this, I need you to promise me something. Anything. Don't protect me from the truth. Don't hide things because you think I can't handle them. If something in your world affects me, I need to know. Adrian studied her face for a long moment. Then he nodded. I promise. Complete honesty. Even when it's uncomfortable. Thank you. He kissed her goodbye at the door, slow and thorough, a promise of things to come. And then he was gone, leaving Lena alone in her apartment that suddenly felt smaller and emptier than it had before. She spent the rest of Sunday in a daze, doing laundry and meal prep while her mind spun in circles. Rachel called twice, but Lena let it go to voicemail, not ready to explain what had happened, what was happening, what might happen next. By Monday evening, when she was getting ready for her overnight shift, the reality had settled into something manageable. She was dating someone. Someone unusual, yes. Someone dangerous, definitely. But someone who made her feel alive in a way she hadn't in years. She could handle that. The ER was chaos from the moment she walked in. A multi-car pileup on the interstate had flooded them with trauma cases, and Lena spent the first 4 hours of her shift running between rooms, triaging injuries, calling out orders to residents who looked like they might pass out from stress. She was elbow deep in a chest tube insertion when her phone buzzed in her pocket. She ignored it, couldn't afford the distraction when a patient's lung was collapsing, but it buzzed again and again. "Dr. Reeves, can you take over?" she asked the attending, already pulling off her gloves. "I need 30 seconds. She ducked into the supply closet, checked her phone, and felt her blood go cold. 5 messages. All from Adrian. "Don't react. Stay calm. Someone's been asking questions about you at the hospital. Man in his 40s, dark coat, carrying a visitor badge. Says he's a lawyer working on your divorce case. You don't have a lawyer working on your case anymore. If you see him, don't engage. Find security. Call me immediately." Lena's hands shook as she typed back. "Who is he?" The response came instantly. "I don't know yet, but I'm finding out. Are you safe? I'm at work. In the ER. There are cameras and security everywhere. Good. Stay in public areas. I'm sending someone. Adrian, you're scaring me. I know. I'm sorry. But I need you to trust me. Just until I know what this is." Lena's heart hammered against her ribs. She stuck her head out of the supply closet, scanned the ER waiting area through the small window. Patients and families, the usual chaos of a Monday night. No one who looked obviously wrong. But then she saw him. A man in a dark coat, standing near the registration desk. Mid-40s, average height, unremarkable face. He was talking to one of the intake nurses, gesturing toward the treatment area. The nurse shook her head, pointed toward the waiting room. The man's gaze swept the ER, and for a fraction of a second his eyes locked on Lena's through the small window. She jerked back, pulse skyrocketing. Her phone buzzed again. "Lena, talk to me. I see him. He's in the waiting area. He looked right at me. Get to security, now. Don't go anywhere alone." But even as she read the message, an announcement crackled over the PA system. "Lena Carter to Trauma 3. Lena Carter, Trauma 3, immediate." A trauma call she couldn't ignore. A patient who needed her more than her fear mattered. Lena took a breath, forced her hands to steady, and made a decision. She walked out of the supply closet with her head high, moving with purpose toward Trauma 3. Didn't look toward the waiting area. Didn't acknowledge the man she'd seen. Trauma 3 was controlled chaos. A motorcycle accident, the rider's leg mangled beyond recognition. Dr. Patel was already there, calling out orders, and Lena slipped into the rhythm of emergency medicine like putting on armor. She stabilized the IV line, called for blood, documented vitals, moved with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd done this hundreds of times. The patient was young, maybe 25, and terrified, his eyes rolling with shock and pain. "You're going to be okay," Lena told him, her voice calm even as her heart raced. "We've got you. Just stay with me." They worked for 20 minutes, stabilizing him enough for transport to surgery. When they finally wheeled him out, Lena pulled off her gloves and realized her hands were shaking again. Dr. Patel noticed. "You all right, Carter? You look pale." "I'm fine, just tired." She forced a smile. "Long shift. Go take 5. Get some coffee. I'll cover if anything else comes in." Lena nodded and headed for the break room, pulling out her phone. Another message from Adrian. Status? Had a trauma. Patient stable. I'm okay. The man left 10 minutes ago. Security footage shows him asking multiple staff members about you, where you work, what shifts you pull, if you have family who visit. Cold dread spread through her chest. Why would someone be asking about me? That's what I'm trying to find out. I've got people running his photo through databases now. Sit tight. But sitting tight wasn't an option. Lena had 4 more hours on her shift, 4 more hours of being exposed and vulnerable while someone she didn't know asked questions about her life. She called Adrian instead of texting. He answered on the first ring. "Are you somewhere private?" he asked immediately. "Break room. Alone." She sank into one of the uncomfortable plastic chairs, suddenly exhausted. "Adrian, what's happening?" "I don't know yet, but I'm going to find out." His voice was steel wrapped in velvet. "I have someone at the hospital now, security consultant named Marcus. Different Marcus," he added, catching himself. "He's ex-military, completely trustworthy. He'll stay in the ER waiting area until your shift ends, just as a precaution." "You think I'm in danger?" I think someone showing up asking detailed questions about you less than a week after I got involved in your life is not a coincidence. Adrian paused. I think this might be connected to me, to something I did, someone I crossed. And if that's true, I need to handle it before it touches you. The implications of that settled over her like a heavy blanket. This was what he'd warned her about. The risks, the complications, the way his world could bleed into hers without permission. Should I be scared? She asked quietly. You should be careful, aware, but not scared. Not yet. His tone shifted, became almost gentle. I won't let anything happen to you, Lena. That's a promise. You can't promise that. You can't control everything. Watch me. The fierce certainty in those two words should have been arrogant. Instead, it was oddly comforting. They talked for a few more minutes, Adrian explaining what his people were doing, what security measures he was putting in place. When Lena finally hung up and returned to the ER floor, she felt steadier. Still scared, but no longer alone in it. The rest of her shift passed without incident. She treated a diabetic crisis, sutured a kitchen knife wound, talked down a patient having a panic attack. Normal chaos. The kind she could handle. And in the corner of the waiting room, a man in a dark jacket sat reading a magazine, his eyes tracking every person who came and went. Adrian's person. Her protection. It should have felt invasive. Instead, it felt like being seen. When her shift finally ended at 7 a.m., Lena was dead on her feet. She changed out of her scrubs in the locker room, moving on autopilot, and stepped out into the parking lot, expecting to find her car where she'd left it. Instead, she found Adrian leaning against a sleek black sedan, 2 cups of coffee in his hands and dark circles under his eyes that suggested he hadn't slept. What are you doing here? She asked, too tired to be anything but direct. Making sure you got to your car safely. He handed her one of the coffees. And bringing you breakfast if you want it. You've been here all night? Not here specifically, but close. Coordinating, researching, making calls. He gestured toward his car. Let me drive you home. Marcus will follow in your car. Make sure you get there safely. Lena should have argued, should have insisted she was fine, that she could take care of herself. But the truth was, she was exhausted and scared and desperately grateful not to be alone. Okay, she said simply. The drive was quiet. Adrian didn't press for conversation, seemed to understand she needed silence to decompress. When they pulled up to her building, he walked her to her door, checked her apartment with quick efficiency, and only then seemed to relax slightly. Did you find out who he was? Lena asked, dropping her bag on the couch. Not yet. The photo isn't matching anything in standard databases. Whoever he is, he's careful about his digital footprint. Adrian ran a hand through his hair, the first sign of stress she'd seen from him. But I will find out. I have people working on it. People. You keep saying that. How many people work for you? Directly? 3 full-time, maybe a dozen contractors I use regularly. Indirectly? He shrugged. I have favors owed all over the world. Information brokers, security consultants, lawyers who specialize in creative solutions. When I need something, I call in those favors. That sounds expensive. It is, but worth it. He moved to her kitchen, started making more coffee without asking. I'm going to have someone watch your building for the next few days, just as a precaution. Adrian, I can't have bodyguards following me around. I have a job. A life? I know. And I'm not suggesting anything obvious. Just someone nearby. Someone who'll notice if that man comes back, if anything seems wrong. He turned to face her. Please, let me do this. Let me know you're safe while I figure out what's happening. The please did it, the crack in his controlled facade, the genuine worry in his eyes. Okay, Lena said, but only until you know what this is. I'm not living in fear indefinitely. Fair enough. Adrian poured coffee for both of them, and they sat at her small kitchen table in companionable exhaustion. You should sleep. You look dead on your feet. So do you. I'll sleep when this is resolved. He said it matter-of-factly, like going without sleep was just another tool in his arsenal. Right now I need to make some calls, follow up on leads. Lena reached across the table, covered his hand with hers. Thank you for protecting me, for caring enough to lose sleep over it. Adrian's expression softened. You're not something I do halfway, Lena. When I care about someone, I care completely. That means making sure they're safe, even if it costs me. That sounds exhausting. It is. His smile was tired but genuine. But you're worth it. He left after finishing his coffee, promising to call the moment he knew anything. Lena locked the door behind him, checked it twice, and fell into bed without even changing clothes. She dreamed of dark coats and questions, of Adrian's gray eyes and promises he might not be able to keep, of danger she couldn't see but could feel closing in around her like a trap she'd walked into willingly. When she woke 6 hours later, her phone had 3 new messages. One from Rachel, "Lunch tomorrow? You're worrying me with the radio silence." One from the hospital scheduler, "Can you pick up an extra shift Friday? We're short." And one from Adrian, "Found him. We need to talk. I'm coming over at 6. Lena checked the time, 5:30. She had 30 minutes to shower and make herself presentable before Adrian arrived with whatever news he'd found. Whatever was coming, she had a feeling it was going to change everything. She managed a quick shower and threw on clean jeans and a sweater before Adrian's knock came precisely at 6. When she opened the door, he looked different. Not tired anymore, but focused in a way that made the air around him feel charged. "Come in," Lena said, stepping aside. Adrian entered carrying a manila folder and the same grim expression she'd seen when he'd told her about the woman he couldn't save. He waited until she'd closed the door before speaking. "The man at the hospital is named James Holloway, private investigator out of Philadelphia. 15 years in the business, mostly corporate espionage and infidelity cases. Clean record, no connection to organized crime." Lena sank onto her couch, processing. "So, not one of your enemies?" "No." "Which is actually worse." Adrian sat beside her, close enough that she could feel his warmth. "Because it means someone hired him to investigate you specifically. Someone who doesn't know about me yet, or doesn't care. But who would hire someone to investigate me? I'm nobody." "You're not nobody." Adrian's voice was firm. "And I think I know who's behind this." He opened the folder, pulled out several printed documents. "Your ex-husband's employer filed an embezzlement complaint 3 days ago. Not against Marcus, against the person who allegedly provided evidence of his theft." Lena's stomach dropped. "Against you?" "They don't know it's me. The documentation I gave Marcus was anonymous, but someone at his company started asking questions about how their accountant suddenly decided to pay back money to his ex-wife right when they were building a case against him." Adrian spread the papers across her coffee table. "They think you might have hired someone to dig up dirt on Marcus. They hired Holloway to find out who." "That's insane. I wouldn't even know how to do that." "I know, but from their perspective, the timing is suspicious. Marcus returns $40,000 to you right before they discover he stole $60 from them. They're worried you might have evidence that could complicate their case, or that whoever helped you might be planning to blackmail them next." Lena pressed her hands to her face, trying to organize the chaos in her head. "So they're investigating me because you helped me?" "Essentially." Adrian's hand found her shoulder, grounding. "But it's manageable. Holloway doesn't know about me. He knows someone asked questions at Marcus's office, but the trail dead ends there. I made sure of it." "Then what was he doing at my hospital?" "Building a profile. Trying to understand who you are, who you know, whether you're the type of person who might hire someone like me." Adrian's jaw tightened. "He won't find anything because there's nothing to find. As far as anyone can prove, Marcus had a crisis of conscience and paid you back. That's it." "But you're worried." "I'm careful. There's a difference." He pulled out another document, this one showing a series of photographs. Lena recognized the hospital parking lot, the entrance to her building. "Holloway's been watching you for 3 days, following your routine, documenting your movements. It's standard surveillance, nothing threatening. But I don't like people watching what's mine." The possessiveness in that last sentence should have bothered her. Instead, it sent heat through her chest. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now I make the problem go away." Adrian gathered the papers back into the folder. "Marcus's employer wants to know if there's a threat to their investigation. I'm going to prove there isn't. I'll feed Holloway information that leads him to conclude you had nothing to do with exposing Marcus's embezzlement, That Marcus panicked on his own, made restitution to you hoping it would look good when his employer found out about the larger theft. Will they believe that? They will when I'm done. Adrian's expression was cold calculation. I'll make sure the timeline supports it, that the documentation reads the right way. Holloway will file his report saying you're clean, the company will pursue their case against Marcus without worrying about complications, and everyone moves on. Except Marcus. Except Marcus, Adrian agreed, who brought this on himself by stealing from his employer and his wife. He made his choices. Now he lives with the consequences. Lena should feel bad for her ex-husband, should feel some pang of guilt that her involvement with Adrian was destroying what was left of Marcus's life. But all she felt was a cold satisfaction that justice, messy and complicated in outside official channels, was finally being served. How long will this take? She asked. A week, maybe 2. I need to be careful, make sure the manipulation isn't obvious, but it will resolve. Adrian turned to face her fully, and then you'll be clear. No more investigators, no more surveillance, just your normal life. Is that what you want? For me to go back to my normal life? No. The single word was fierce. I want you in my life, permanently. But I won't let my world destroy yours to make that happen. If you need distance while I clean this up, I understand. Lena considered this. The smart choice was obvious. Step back, let Adrian handle the mess he'd created, protect herself from further complications. It's what the old Lena would have done, the one who played it safe and followed the rules. But that Lena had gotten her nothing except a broken marriage and an empty apartment. I don't want distance, she said quietly. I want what you promised me, honesty, even when it's uncomfortable. Partnership, not protection. Adrian's expression shifted. Surprise, relief, something deeper she couldn't name. You're sure? I'm terrified, but I'm sure. She reached for his hand, threaded her fingers through his. I want to know your world, not just the sanitized version you think I can handle. I want to understand how you do what you do. That's dangerous knowledge. I know, but I trust you with my safety. Trust me with your truth. He was quiet for a long moment, studying her face like he was looking for cracks in her resolve. Then he stood, pulled her up with him, and said, Okay, come with me tomorrow. I have work to do, problems to solve. You can watch, ask questions, see what this actually looks like. And if at any point you want to leave, we leave. No judgment, no pressure. Where are we going? A meeting with a client, woman whose business partner is trying to force her out through legal intimidation and manufactured scandal. She needs leverage to fight back. Adrian's smile was sharp. It's relatively tame as far as my work goes. Good introduction to how I operate. Lena's heart hammered. This was real, not abstract anymore, not hypothetical. Tomorrow she'd step fully into Adrian's world and see whether she could actually handle what she'd claimed she could. What time? She asked. 10 a.m.? Wear something professional but not formal. We're meeting at her office. They ordered takeout and spent the rest of the evening talking about everything except surveillance and private investigators. Adrian told her about growing up in Singapore, about the strange experience of being American abroad and foreign at home. Lena told him about nursing school, about the patient who'd made her realize she'd found her calling. Normal things. Human things. The kind of conversation that made it easy to forget they were dancing on the edge of something dangerous. When Adrian finally left close to midnight, he kissed her at the door with an intensity that made her knees weak. Get some sleep, he murmured against her lips. Tomorrow might be more than you bargained for. I can handle it. I know you can. That's what scares me. Lena spent the next morning alternating between confidence and panic. She changed outfits 3 times before settling on dark slacks and a blazer that made her look competent without trying too hard. Professional but approachable, like Adrian had suggested. He picked her up at 9:30 in the same black sedan, looking unfairly put together in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than her monthly rent. His eyes swept over her, approval clear in his expression. Perfect, he said simply. The drive took them to the business district, all glass towers and expensive coffee shops. Adrian parked in a reserved spot beneath a mid-rise building and led her to the elevators. Her name is Catherine Reeves, he explained as they rode up. She built a tech startup from nothing, software that helps hospitals manage patient data more efficiently. Her business partner, David Chen, provided initial funding, but no actual work. Now that the company's profitable, he wants majority control. He's been feeding stories to tech blogs about mismanagement, hiring lawyers to find violations in their operating agreement, making her life hell. What's she hiring you to do? Find out what Chen doesn't want anyone to know, and make sure he understands that forcing Catherine out will cost him more than it's worth. The elevator doors opened onto a sleek office space. Just observe. You don't have to say anything unless you want to. Catherine Reeves was a woman in her early 40s with sharp eyes and the kind of exhaustion that came from fighting battles on too many fronts. She stood when they entered her office, relief visible on her face when she saw Adrian. "Thank you for coming," she said, shaking his hand. Then she noticed Lena, curiosity flickering. "I didn't know you were bringing someone." "This is Lena Carter. She's observing today, learning how I work. Anything we discuss stays confidential. You have my word on that." Adrian's tone was professional, but warm. "Lena, Catherine Reeves." They shook hands, and Lena saw Catherine reassess her with the quick evaluation of someone used to reading people in high-stakes situations. "You're the nurse," Catherine said suddenly. "The one from the hospital's surveillance footage." Lena blinked, caught off guard. "How did you I asked Adrian to look into everyone who might be connected to the investigation of my company. Made sure there were no conflicts, no complications." Catherine's smile was tired. "Your ex-husband's employer uses our software. Small world." "Very small," Adrian agreed, settling into one of the chairs across from Catherine's desk. "But Lena's situation is resolved. It won't impact your case." "Good." Catherine pulled out a thick folder, set it on her desk. "Because I need you to move fast. Chen's lawyers filed another motion yesterday, claiming I've been embezzling company funds. It's complete fiction, but defending against it means opening our books to discovery, which will cost us time and money we don't have." "What does he really want?" Adrian asked, leaning forward slightly. "Not the surface goal. The actual endgame." Catherine hesitated, then said, "Control. He spent 20 years funding startups, watching other people build companies from his money while he stays in the background. This is the first one that actually succeeded. And he can't stand that it's my name on the patents, my vision driving the growth. He wants to push me out and take credit for everything." "Has he approached you about buying out your shares?" 3 times. Each offer lower than the last. He thinks if he makes my life miserable enough, I'll sell just to escape." Her hands clenched on the desk. "I'd rather burn the whole company down than let him win." Adrian was quiet for a moment, his fingers drumming once against the chair arm. "Do you want him gone completely, or just neutralized?" "What's the difference?" "Neutralized means I find leverage that keeps him from attacking you, force a stalemate where you both maintain your current positions. Gone means I find enough dirt that he has to sell his shares back to you at a loss and walk away permanently." Adrian's expression was unreadable. One is faster and cleaner. The other is more permanent but requires deeper digging. Catherine didn't hesitate. "Gone. I want him out of my company and my life." "Then that's what you'll get." Adrian pulled out his phone, made a quick note. "I'll need access to everything. Company emails, financial records, Chen's personal background, his other business ventures. Anything that might reveal where he's vulnerable. I'll have my assistant send everything over today." Catherine's relief was palpable. "How long will this take?" 2 weeks, maybe 3. I move carefully when the stakes are this high." Adrian stood and Lena followed his lead. "In the meantime, don't engage with his lawyers directly. Route everything through your legal team, keep documentation of every interaction, and don't let them provoke you into doing anything reckless." "I can manage that." They shook hands again, and Adrian led Lena back to the elevator. Once the doors closed and they were alone, he turned to her. "Questions?" "You didn't ask her what she was willing to pay," Lena said. "How do you know she can afford you?" "I already know what she can afford. I researched her company's financials before I agreed to meet with her. She's burning through cash fighting Chen's legal attacks, but she has enough for my fee if she prioritizes correctly." "And if she didn't? Would you still help her?" Adrian considered this. "Probably. I don't like people who use money and lawyers to bully others out of what they've earned. It offends my sense of how the world should work." They reached the parking garage and Adrian led her to the car. But instead of opening her door, he leaned against it, arms crossed. studying her face. "What did you think," he asked, "of that meeting, of how I operate?" "I think you're good at reading people, at understanding what they really need versus what they say they need." Lena moved closer until she was standing in his space. "And I think Catherine Reeves is going to get exactly what she asked for, even if the methods aren't strictly legal." "Does that bother you?" "It should." Lena surprised herself with her own honesty. "It should bother me that you're planning to destroy someone's life and career because he's being a bully. But all I can think about is how many times I've seen people like Chen win because they have better lawyers and deeper pockets. So no, it doesn't bother me as much as it probably should." Adrian's expression was unreadable. "You understand that there's no going back from this kind of knowledge, right? You've seen how I work. You know I'm planning to dig into someone's life until I find something damaging enough to force him out. That makes you complicit. I know. And you're okay with that?" "I'm okay with you." Lena reached up, touched his face gently. "With who you are and what you do. I'm not naive enough to think it's all clean and moral, but I'm also not naive enough to think the official channels always deliver justice. Sometimes the gray areas are the only place where things actually get fixed." Adrian caught her hand, pressed a kiss to her palm. "You're dangerous, you know that? More dangerous than you realize." "Why?" "Because you make me want to be better than I am while also accepting me exactly as I am. That's a rare thing." They drove to a small cafe for lunch, and Adrian spent the meal explaining his research process. How he built profiles on targets, identified pressure points, assembled information into leverage. It was clinical, methodical, and deeply effective. "The key is understanding what someone values more than winning," he explained, stealing a bite of her sandwich. "For some people, it's reputation. Others, it's money or family or freedom. Find that thing, and you find your leverage." "What do you value more than winning?" Lena asked. Adrian paused, considering. "Control. The ability to dictate outcomes instead of reacting to them. I've spent my entire adult life building systems that let me control situations that seem uncontrollable. The thought of being powerless again." He trailed off, something dark flickering across his face. "Again?" "My mother's cancer. Watching her die slowly while the best doctors and the most expensive treatments did nothing. My father falling apart and me being 16, unable to stop it, unable to fix anything." His voice went flat. "I was completely powerless, and I swore I'd never feel that way again." Lena's chest ached for the teenager he'd been, desperate and grieving and alone. "Is that why you do this? To maintain control?" "Partially, but also because I'm good at it, and because people need someone who can operate outside the normal constraints." Adrian's eyes met hers. "The world isn't fair, Lena. You know that better than most. Sometimes it needs people who are willing to bend the rules to make things right." They spent the afternoon at Adrian's apartment, where he worked on Catherine's case, while Lena curled up on his couch with a medical journal. It was oddly domestic. Him at his desk making quiet phone calls while she highlighted passages about new trauma protocols, both of them existing in the same space without needing constant interaction. Around 6, Adrian's phone rang. He glanced at the screen, and his expression shifted. All business, controlled intensity. "I need to take this," he said, standing. "It's about Holloway, the investigator." He disappeared into his bedroom, and Lena tried not to listen to the muffled conversation. Tried, and failed. When Adrian emerged 10 minutes later, he looked satisfied. "It's done. Holloway's filing his report tomorrow. You're clear. He found no evidence connecting you to Marcus's decision to pay back the money, no indication you hired anyone to investigate him. As far as his client is concerned, you're just an ex-wife who got lucky." Relief flooded through Lena so fast it made her dizzy. "So no more surveillance? No more people asking questions at my hospital?" "No more anything. You're completely in the clear." Adrian moved to sit beside her, pulled her close. "You can go back to your normal life, no complications, no danger." "What if I don't want normal anymore?" "Then we figure out what comes next." He kissed her temple, gentle and grounding. Together. They ordered dinner in and spent the evening planning. Lena had 3 days off coming up after her Friday shift. Adrian suggested taking her somewhere, not far, just up the coast to a small town where they could walk on the beach and exist without the weight of his work or her schedule pressing down on them. I want to know you without the chaos, he said. Want to learn all the small things. How you take your coffee at different times of day, what you're like in the morning, whether you're one of those people who talks during movies. I absolutely talk during movies. Deal breaker. This is over. His expression was solemn, but his eyes laughed. Lena swatted his arm. You're ridiculous. You like it. She did. Liked his dry humor and unexpected softness. Liked the way he touched her like she was precious but not fragile. Liked that he challenged her to be braver than she thought she could be. Later, when the conversation had drifted into comfortable silence and the city lights painted shadows across the apartment, Adrian said quietly, I'm falling for you. Just so you know. In case that matters. Lena's breath caught. They'd been dancing around the feeling for days, acknowledging the pull without naming it. But hearing him say it out loud made it real in a way that terrified and exhilarated her in equal measure. It matters, she said finally, and I'm falling for you too. Even though you're dangerous and complicated and probably going to give me a heart attack from stress before we're 40. Only probably? Definitely. I just didn't want to sound dramatic. Adrian laughed, pulled her into his lap, and kissed her until the fear dissolved into something warmer. When they finally broke apart, he rested his forehead against hers and said, Stay tonight, not in the guest room, with me. It wasn't a demand or an expectation, just an invitation wrapped in hope. Lena answered by kissing him again, slower this time, with intention. By the time they made it to his bedroom, they were both breathless and certain. Being with Adrian was different from anything Lena had experienced before. Marcus had been perfunctory, efficient, treating intimacy like another item on a checklist. But Adrian touched her like he had all the time in the world, like learning what made her gasp was more important than any destination. He was patient and intense and absolutely present, reading her body's responses with the same attention he applied to everything else. When she fell apart in his arms, he held her through it, like she was something precious he'd been entrusted to protect. Afterward, they lay tangled together in sheets that smelled like him, Lena's head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat slow, back to normal. That was... She trailed off, not sure how to describe it. Yeah, Adrian agreed, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her shoulder. It was. They drifted towards sleep wrapped around each other, and for the first time in months, maybe years, Lena felt completely safe. Not because nothing bad could happen, but because she trusted the man beside her to face it with her. The next few days passed in a blur of work and stolen moments. Lena's Friday overnight shift was brutal, a gang-related shooting that flooded the ER with trauma cases, followed by a woman in cardiac arrest who they lost despite 40 minutes of resuscitation efforts. By the time she clocked out Saturday morning, she was emotionally wrung out and physically exhausted. Adrian picked her up from the hospital with coffee and bagels, took one look at her face, and didn't ask questions. Just drove her to his apartment, ran her a bath, and let her decompress in silence. When she emerged an hour later feeling almost human, he had breakfast waiting and a bag packed for their trip up the coast. We don't have to go if you're too tired, he offered. We can stay here, order in, do nothing. No, I need this. Need to get away from the hospital smell and the memories of last night. Lena managed a small smile. Take me somewhere beautiful and make me forget about cardiac arrests and teenagers with gunshot wounds. The drive took 3 hours, winding up the coast highway with ocean views that made Lena's chest ache with their beauty. Adrian had rented a small cottage right on the beach, private, secluded, with windows that overlooked waves crashing against dark rocks. They spent the weekend existing in a bubble removed from reality, walked on the beach in the morning fog, made love in the afternoon sunlight, talked about everything from childhood dreams to favorite books to whether they believed in fate or just coincidence. I don't believe in fate, Adrian said Sunday evening as they watched the sunset from the cottage's deck. I think we make choices and live with consequences. That's all life is, a series of decisions that lead to other decisions. Then you chose me, Lena said. When I walked up to you in that club, you could have said no, sent me away. But you chose to say yes. Best decision I ever made. He pulled her closer, wrapped his arms around her from behind. You? I chose to be brave instead of safe. Chose to trust you despite every rational reason not to. She leaned back against his chest. Also the best decision I ever made. They drove back to the city Monday afternoon, both reluctant to return to real life but knowing they had to. Lena had a shift Tuesday night. Adrian had Catherine's case to resolve and a dozen other problems waiting for his attention. But something had shifted between them over the weekend. They'd stopped hedging, stopped pretending this was casual or temporary. They were in this together, whatever this became. When Adrian dropped her at her apartment, he said, "Move in with me." Lena blinked, certain she'd misheard. "What?" "Move in with me. Not today, not next week, but soon, when you're ready." He turned to face her fully. "I know it's fast. I know we've barely known each other a month, but I don't want stolen moments anymore. I want you in my space, in my life, permanently." Her heart hammered against her ribs. The smart answer was to slow down, to point out that they barely knew each other, that moving in together was a huge step she shouldn't take lightly. But Lena was tired of being smart and careful, tired of protecting herself from risks that might actually be worth taking. "Ask me again in 2 months," she said, "after you've seen me at my worst, after you've dealt with me coming home from nightmare shifts and stress-eating ice cream at 3 a.m., after the honeymoon phase wears off and you remember that I'm difficult and stubborn and not always easy to love. You're assuming those things will change how I feel." "They might. They won't. Adrian's certainty was absolute. "But okay, 2 months. I'll ask again then, and you can give me a real answer." He kissed her goodbye, and Lena floated into her apartment on a cloud of possibility and terror. Rachel called 5 minutes later, as if sensing drama through some best friend telepathy. "Okay, I've given you space like you asked, but I need an update right now or I'm going to lose my mind," Rachel said without preamble. "Are you still seeing the maybe criminal? Did he turn out to be an actual criminal? Are you in danger? Do I need to stage an intervention?" Lena laughed despite herself. "I'm still seeing him. He's not exactly a criminal, more like morally flexible. And I'm not in danger. She searched for the right word. "Happy. I think I'm actually happy." "Oh no, you're in love with him." "I didn't say that. You didn't have to. I can hear it in your voice." Rachel sighed dramatically. "Okay, fine. I'm happy for you. Terrified, but happy." "When do I get to meet him and judge whether he's good enough for my best friend?" "Soon. Maybe next week. If I can mentally prepare him for your interrogation tactics." They talked for another hour, Lena carefully editing out the parts about private investigators and leverage and the exact nature of Adrian's work. Rachel didn't need to know everything. Some truths were too dangerous to share, even with people you trusted. The next 2 weeks fell into a rhythm. Lena worked her shifts, came home to find Adrian waiting more often than not. He'd cook dinner or bring takeout, and they'd talk about their days in carefully edited versions. She told him about patience and protocols. He told her about clients and solutions, leaving out the details that would make her complicit in things she couldn't unknow. Catherine's case resolved exactly as Adrian had predicted. He'd found evidence that Chen had falsified investor reports on 3 previous startups, inflating projections to secure funding he knew the companies couldn't deliver on. It wasn't technically illegal, creative accounting rather than fraud, but it was enough to destroy his reputation in the tight-knit venture capital community. Adrian presented the evidence to Chen privately, along with a simple choice: sell his shares back to Catherine at current market value and sign an NDA, or watch his career implode when the documentation went public. Chen sold. Catherine called Adrian the day the paperwork finalized, her voice thick with grateful tears. "You gave me my company back, my life back. Thank you doesn't feel like enough." "It's enough," Adrian assured her. "Just pay the invoice and we're square." He was satisfied but not celebratory when he told Lena about it later that evening. Just another problem solved, another person helped, another day in the life he'd built for himself. "Do you ever get tired of it?" Lena asked. "Of being the person everyone comes to when they can't fix things themselves?" "Sometimes," Adrian admitted. "But then I remember what it felt like to be powerless, to need help and not have anyone capable of giving it. And I keep going." They were lying in his bed, the city lights painting patterns across the ceiling. Lena traced the scar on his jaw with gentle fingers. "Where did you get this?" she asked. "Singapore. I was 22, working private security for a businessman who'd made enemies. 3 men jumped us outside his office. I was faster, but one of them had a knife. He caught her hand, pressed a kiss to her palm. Could have been worse. The businessmen lived. I learned to be more careful, and I got an interesting scar out of it. You could have died. I could have, but I didn't. That's all that matters. Lena absorbed this, adding it to the growing collection of truths she knew about him. Adrian Vale lived in danger like other people lived in cities. Aware of it, careful around it, but ultimately at home in it. And somehow, impossibly, she was falling in love with him anyway. 2 months passed faster than Lena thought possible. Summer faded into early fall, bringing cooler nights and the kind of golden light that made the city look almost romantic. She settled into a rhythm with Adrian that felt both new and ancient, like they'd been doing this for years instead of weeks. She still kept her apartment, though she spent most nights at his place. Her clothes had migrated to his closet in small increments. Her toothbrush claimed space in his bathroom. Her medical journals stacked on his coffee table next to his case files. They hadn't officially discussed it, but she was already halfway moved in without either of them acknowledging it out loud. Rachel had finally met Adrian 3 weeks earlier over dinner at a restaurant neither of them could afford on their own. Lena had been terrified of her best friend's judgment, but Adrian had charmed Rachel within the first 10 minutes by asking detailed questions about her work as a social worker and actually listening to the answers. "Okay, I get it," Rachel had whispered when Adrian excused himself to take a phone call. "He's hot and intense and clearly obsessed with you. But Lena, seriously, are you sure you know what you're doing? This man has secrets written all over him." "I know exactly what I'm doing," Lena had replied, surprised by her own certainty. "And yes, he has secrets, but so does everyone. The difference is he's honest with me about having them." Rachel had studied her face for a long moment, then sighed. "You're happy, like genuinely happy in a way I haven't seen since before Marcus. So I'm going to trust your judgment and just be here if you need me." "Thank you. But if he breaks your heart, I know people who know people. Just saying." Lena had laughed, but she'd also tucked that knowledge away. It was oddly comforting to know that even her social worker best friend had connections to people who could make problems disappear if needed. Apparently, Adrian's worldview was more common than she'd realized. Work continued its relentless pace. Lena had picked up extra shifts to pad her savings account, the $40,000 from Marcus burning a hole in her consciousness until she'd finally enrolled in the BSN program she'd been putting off for years. Classes started in January, and the thought of actually moving forward with her career instead of just surviving it made her feel alive in a way she'd almost forgotten was possible. Adrian supported her ambitions with quiet intensity. He'd cleared out one of his spare rooms and turned it into a study for her, complete with a standing desk and the kind of ergonomic chair that cost more than her first car. When she'd protested the expense, he'd just shrugged and said, "You're going to be spending a lot of time studying. You should be comfortable." It was gestures like that, practical support without fanfare, that made Lena fall deeper. Adrian didn't just say he cared. He showed it in 1,000 small ways that added up to something she was afraid to name but couldn't deny. The Wednesday before Thanksgiving, Adrian came home from a meeting looking troubled. Lena was curled up on his couch reviewing anatomy notes when he walked in, and she knew immediately something was wrong. "What happened?" she asked, setting aside her textbook. Adrian loosened his tie, poured himself a whiskey, and sat beside her with the weight of someone carrying bad news. "I had a meeting with a potential client today, corporate executive who's being blackmailed by a former employee over an affair. Standard case should have been straightforward. But the blackmailer is someone I know, someone I used to work with before I went independent." Adrian took a long drink, staring at nothing. "His name is Victor Kane. He's good at what he does: leverage, information brokerage, finding dirt and selling it to the highest bidder. But he has no ethics, no lines he won't cross. I left his organization specifically because I didn't want to be that person." Lena's stomach tightened. "And now he's involved in one of your cases. Now he's about to become a problem." Adrian set down his glass and turned to face her. "Victor doesn't like that I left. Doesn't like that I've built a successful independent practice doing the same work he does but with actual principles. He's been waiting for an opportunity to undermine me, And this case is perfect for it. What are you going to do? I'm going to solve my client's problem, but doing that means going up against Victor directly, and he's not someone who loses gracefully. Adrian's expression was grim. This is going to get ugly, Lena, potentially dangerous. And I need you to understand what that means before we go any further. What does it mean? It means Victor will dig into my life looking for weaknesses. He'll find you. He'll try to use you against me, either through intimidation or leverage, or just making your life difficult enough that I back off to protect you. Adrian took her hand, his grip tight. I can't let him win this, but I also can't let you get hurt because of my work. So I need you to decide whether you want to stay in this with me, or whether you want distance until it's resolved. Lena had known this moment was coming since the day she'd asked Adrian to dance, known that eventually his world would crash into hers in ways she couldn't control, that loving him meant accepting risks most people never had to consider. I'm not going anywhere, she said firmly, but I need to know what we're up against. Who is Victor Kane, really? What can he actually do to us? Adrian's expression was complex, relief and worry, and something darker. Victor Kane is what I could become if I stopped caring about collateral damage. He's brilliant and ruthless and completely immoral. He's blackmailed senators, destroyed careers, ruined lives, all in service of whoever pays him enough. And if he decides I'm a threat to his reputation, he won't stop until he's broken me or I've broken him. Have you gone up against him before? Once. 3 years ago, we had competing clients on opposite sides of a corporate merger. I won, but barely. Victor never forgot it. Adrian stood, moved to the window, stared out at the city. He's been watching me since then, waiting for the right moment to settle the score. This is it. Then we fight back. Lena joined him at the window, slid her hand into his. You're not alone in this anymore, Adrian. Whatever he does, whatever happens, we handle it together. You don't know what you're saying. Yes, I do. She turned him to face her, held his gaze steadily. I know exactly what I'm saying. I love you. I'm choosing you. And I'm not running just because things get complicated. Adrian went very still. Say that again. Which part? The part where you love me. Lena's heart hammered, but she didn't look away. I love you. I'm in love with you. Have been for weeks, probably. I just didn't want to say it first and scare you away. Scare me away? Adrian laughed, pulled her close, buried his face in her hair. Lena, I've been in love with you since that night at Mrs. Nguyen's restaurant when you challenged me to be honest. I just didn't want to overwhelm you by saying it too soon. We're both idiots. Completely. He kissed her, soft and deep and full of promise. When they broke apart, his expression had shifted, still worried, but determined now instead of conflicted. Okay, you want to do this together? Then I need you to trust me completely. Do exactly what I say when I say it, even if it doesn't make sense in the moment. I can do that. And if at any point I tell you to walk away, to go somewhere safe and wait, you do it. No arguments, no hesitation, because I can handle Victor Kane. What I can't handle is him using you to get to me. Lena wanted to argue, wanted to insist she could take care of herself. But she also understood that Adrian's work operated under different rules than she was used to. Trust meant accepting that sometimes he knew better than she did about dangers she couldn't see. Okay, she agreed. I'll trust your judgment, but you have to promise to keep me informed. No protecting me from information because you think I can't handle it. Deal. They spent the rest of the evening strategizing. Adrian explained his client's situation in detail. A VP at a pharmaceutical company who'd had a brief affair with an assistant 5 years ago. The assistant had been fired for unrelated performance issues, but blamed the VP, and now Victor Kane was helping her weaponize the affair through carefully timed leaks to industry publications and threats of a lawsuit. The affair was consensual and ended cleanly, Adrian said, pulling up files on his laptop. But the optics are bad. Older man in power, younger woman just starting her career. Even though nothing improper happened, the story could destroy his reputation and tank the company's stock price if it goes public the wrong way. So how do you stop it? I find out what Victor's really after. This kind of blackmail is never just about money. There's always a larger play. Maybe he's shorting the company's stock and wants the price to drop. Maybe he has a competing client who benefits from chaos at this particular pharmaceutical company. Or maybe, Adrian paused, his expression darkening. Maybe this whole thing is a setup to draw me in so he can make his move against me directly. You think he's using your client as bait? I think Victor is smart enough to kill multiple birds with one stone. He gets paid by the blackmail victim, damages my client's company, which probably benefits someone else he's working for, and gets to embarrass me in the process. Adrian's smile was cold, but he's also arrogant enough to assume I won't see it coming. Will you? I already have. The next week moved fast. Adrian worked 18-hour days, making calls and pulling together information while Lena went to work and tried to maintain some semblance of normalcy. But the tension was there, constant and building, like waiting for a storm that was definitely coming but hadn't arrived yet. On Friday evening, Lena came home from a particularly brutal shift to find Adrian's apartment dark and empty. Her stomach dropped. He'd promised to be home by 8, had texted her at 7 saying he was wrapping up a meeting and would pick up dinner on the way. It was 9:30, and there was no sign of him. She tried his phone. It went straight to voicemail. Panic rising, she was about to call the police when her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Adrian is fine. He's with me. If you want to see him again, come to the address below. Alone. You have 1 hour. Below the message was an address in the warehouse district, the kind of area that was being gentrified but still had enough dark corners that people disappeared without witnesses. Lena's hands shook as she read the message again. Every instinct screamed that this was a trap, that going there alone was insane, that she should call the police or Adrian's people or anyone except drive into obvious danger by herself. But if there was even a chance Adrian needed help, she couldn't ignore it. She grabbed her keys, tried his phone one more time, still voicemail, and made a choice. She wasn't going in completely blind. She called the one person she knew could help without asking too many questions. Rachel answered on the second ring. Hey, what's up? I need you to do something for me and not ask why. Lena was already heading for her car. I'm sending you an address. If you don't hear from me in 2 hours, call the police and tell them I went there. Tell them I might be in trouble. Lena, what the hell? 2 hours, promise me. Rachel's voice went deadly serious. I promise. But you better call me back. Lena sent the address, hung up, and drove toward the warehouse district with her heart in her throat. The building was exactly as ominous as she'd expected. Old brick, broken windows, the kind of place that screamed bad decisions happen here. She parked on the street under a working streetlight, left her phone on the seat with the location tracker active, and approached the building's entrance. The door was unlocked, which somehow made it worse. Inside, the warehouse was mostly empty, except for a few scattered crates and industrial lighting that buzzed with electricity. And in the center of the space, sitting calmly in a folding chair with his hands behind his back, was Adrian. He wasn't tied up, wasn't injured that she could see, just sitting there looking absolutely furious. Lena, don't, he started, but a voice from the shadows cut him off. Let her come in. We're all friends here. A man stepped into the light, and Lena understood immediately that this was Victor Kane. Mid-40s, expensive suit, the kind of face that was handsome in a sharp, predatory way. He smiled at her like they were meeting at a cocktail party instead of an abandoned warehouse. Miss Carter, thank you for coming. I apologize for the dramatic invitation, but Adrian has been avoiding me, and I needed to ensure we could all have a conversation without interruption. Let him go, Lena said, her voice steadier than she felt. Whatever this is about, it's between you two. I'm not part of it. But that's where you're wrong. Victor moved closer, circling her like a shark. You're the most important part. You're Adrian's weakness, the thing he values more than winning, more than control. And that makes you incredibly valuable to me. Adrian's expression was pure controlled fury. Victor, this is between us. Let her walk out of here, and we can settle this however you want. Oh, we're going to settle this, but Ms. Carter deserves to know what she's gotten herself into. Victor stopped directly in front of Lena. Did Adrian tell you why he really left my organization? Did he tell you what he did to earn his freedom? I don't care about your history, Lena said. I care about leaving, right now. But the history is the interesting part. Victor's smile widened. You see, Adrian worked for me for 3 years, did jobs I assigned, solved problems I identified, made me a significant amount of money. And then one day he decided he had a conscience, decided that some of my methods were too extreme for his delicate sensibilities. So he stole half my client list and left. That's not what happened, Adrian said coldly. Isn't it? You took information that belonged to me, client files, case notes, leverage I'd spent years building, and used it to start your own competing practice. That's theft, Adrian, and theft has consequences. Lena's mind raced, trying to understand the game being played. Victor had gone to elaborate lengths to get both of them here. That meant he wanted something specific, something more than just revenge. What do you want? She asked directly. Victor's eyes lit up with approval. Smart question. I want Adrian to give back what he took. Every client file, every piece of leverage, every advantage he stole from me. And I want him to stop operating in this city. Retire, move away. I don't care. But his practice ends tonight. And if I refuse, Adrian's voice was ice, then I make Miss Carter's life very difficult. I know where she works, where her family lives, what matters to her. I know she's applying to graduate programs, that she has student loans, that her medical license could be called into question if the right allegations were made to the state board. Victor's tone was almost friendly. I don't want to do any of those things, but I will if you force my hand. Lena felt cold spread through her chest. This was what Adrian had tried to protect her from, the reality that his enemies would use her as a weapon against him, that loving him made her vulnerable in ways she couldn't defend against. But she'd meant what she told him. She wasn't running. You made a mistake bringing me into this, she said quietly. Victor raised an eyebrow. Oh? And why is that? Because Adrian was willing to walk away to protect me. He would have given you whatever you wanted if you just threatened me from a distance. Lena took a step closer, gambling everything on a read of the situation. But by bringing me here, by making this personal and direct, you gave me information. I know what you look like. I know your voice. I'm a witness to kidnapping and extortion, and I work in a hospital where I treat police officers and federal agents every single day. You think I can't make your life difficult too? Lena, don't... Adrian started, but she cut him off. No. He needs to understand what he's dealing with. She held Victor's gaze steadily. You researched me. You know I'm a nurse, that I work in trauma, that I see the worst things people can do to each other every single day. What you don't know is that I'm done being afraid of men who think they can control me through threats. I've dealt with my share of bullies. You're just another one with a better suit. Victor's expression shifted. Surprise, reassessment, grudging respect. You've got nerve, I'll give you that. And you've got 15 minutes before my friend calls the police because I didn't check in when I promised. Lena pulled out her phone, showed him the clock. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to let us walk out of here. Adrian is going to give you whatever files you think he stole. I'm sure he can make that happen. And you're going to leave both of us alone going forward, because if you don't, I will make it my personal mission to destroy your reputation in every way I can think of. Is that a threat? It's a promise. I might not have your resources or your connections, but I have time and motivation and a deep understanding of how to document evidence of crimes. Start with kidnapping and extortion tonight. Add in whatever else Adrian's willing to testify about from your shared history, and see how long your business survives the scrutiny. The silence stretched. Victor studied her face, then looked at Adrian, whose expression had shifted from fury to something closer to pride. You found a good one, Victor said finally. Smart, brave, loyal. That's rare. I know, Adrian replied, which is why I'm going to accept her deal. You get the files you want. We walk away. And this ends tonight. And if I decide I want more, then you'll find out exactly how vicious I can be when someone threatens what I love. Adrian's voice was soft but deadly. You know me, Victor. You know what I'm capable of. You really want to find out what I'm willing to do to protect her? Victor considered this, weighing his options. Then he laughed, genuine amusement that echoed in the empty warehouse. You know what? I believe you would, and that's almost worth more than the files. He pulled out his phone, made a quick call. We're done here. Let them go. Two men Lena hadn't noticed emerged from the shadows near the exits. Victor's insurance policy, she realized. He'd never been alone, had always had backup in case things went wrong. "You have 24 hours to deliver the files," Victor said, already heading toward the door. "After that, all bets are off." "You'll have them in 12, Adrian replied. Victor paused at the exit, looked back at them one more time. "For what it's worth, I hope it works out for you two. Real love is hard to find in our line of work. Don't waste it." Then he was gone, and Lena and Adrian were alone in the warehouse, both of them shaking with adrenaline and relief. "Are you insane?" Adrian demanded, pulling her into a tight embrace. "You could have been hurt, could have made things worse, but I didn't." Lena buried her face in his shoulder, let herself shake now that it was over. "And it worked. We're both okay. You terrified me. Good. Now you know how I felt when I got that text." She pulled back to look at him. "Are you actually going to give him the files?" "I don't have a choice, but they won't help him as much as he thinks." Adrian's smile was grim. "Most of that information is years old, and the clients I took from him either retired or moved on to other fixers. He'll get what he thinks he wants, and it won't make a damn bit of difference to his business. But it will satisfy his ego, and that's enough to make him leave us alone." They left the warehouse together, Lena calling Rachel immediately to confirm she was safe. The drive back to Adrian's apartment was quiet, both of them processing what had just happened. "I meant what I said," Lena told him as they rode the elevator up. "About not running, about staying with you despite the risks. Tonight doesn't change that. It should. You shouldn't have to deal with people like Victor, shouldn't have to bargain with criminals in abandoned warehouses just because you're with me. But I am with you, and that means accepting all of it, the good parts and the dangerous parts and everything in between." She took his hand, squeezed tight. "You don't get to protect me from your world anymore. I'm in it now, willingly. We're partners, remember?" Adrian was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Move in with me. Officially. Not halfway, not gradually. I want you here permanently. I want to wake up with you every morning and come home to you every night and build an actual life together. You said you'd ask again in 2 months. It's only been 2 months exactly. I know, and I'm asking." He turned to face her as the elevator doors opened. "Lena Carter, will you move in with me?" She pretended to consider it, drawing out the moment. "Will you promise to keep being honest with me, even when it's hard?" "Always." "And will you accept that I'm going to worry about you, going to want to help with your cases, even when it's safer for me not to?" Reluctantly, yes. "And will you love me even when I'm difficult and stubborn and stress-eating ice cream at 3 a.m. because graduate school is kicking my ass?" "Especially then." Adrian smiled and it transformed his whole face. "So is that a yes? That's a yes?" He kissed her right there in the hallway, deep and certain and full of promise. When they finally broke apart, Lena felt lighter than she had in years. Not because her life had suddenly become simple or safe, but because she'd finally stopped waiting for permission to live it. The next few weeks were a blur of logistics and change. Lena officially gave notice on her apartment, which her landlord accepted with barely disguised relief. He'd been wanting to renovate and increase the rent anyway. Her belongings fit surprisingly easily into Adrian's space, their lives merging with the kind of natural ease that suggested they'd been meant to do this all along. Rachel helped with the move, still eyeing Adrian with cautious approval, but warming to him as she saw how he treated Lena. "He looks at you like you hung the moon," she'd whispered while they were packing boxes. "That's rare. Don't let it go." "I don't plan to." Thanksgiving came and went. Lena worked the holiday shift at the hospital, and Adrian showed up at midnight with takeout and champagne, and they had their own private celebration in the break room while her colleagues pretended not to notice. December arrived with cold rain and early darkness, but Lena barely noticed. She was too busy juggling work and preparing for graduate school and building a life with Adrian that felt both thrilling and solid. Victor Kane kept his word. The files were delivered as promised, and he disappeared from their lives completely. Adrian heard through his network that Victor had taken on a major corporate client in New York and was relocating, which suited them both fine. "Think he'll stay gone?" Lena asked one evening as they cooked dinner together, moving around each other in the kitchen with practiced ease. "Probably. Victor got what he wanted, his ego soothed and me out of his territory. He's smart enough to know that pushing further would cost more than it's worth. Adrian tasted the sauce he was making, added more garlic. And if he's not smart enough, I'll remind him why it's a bad idea to threaten you. Lena smiled, kissed his shoulder as she passed. My dangerous protector. Your dangerous protector who can actually cook, thank you very much. They ate dinner, watched bad television, existed in the kind of comfortable domesticity that Lena had thought she'd lost forever after her divorce. But this was different from what she'd had with Marcus. This was built on honesty and choice, and the conscious decision to keep choosing each other every single day. Christmas approached, and Adrian mentioned almost casually that he'd never really celebrated it. My mother loved the holidays, but after she died, my father and I just sort of stopped, and I've been alone for so long that it seemed pointless to start again. Well, you're not alone anymore, Lena declared. We're celebrating. Tree, decorations, presents, the whole thing. Rachel's hosting dinner, and you're coming. Is that an order? Absolutely. They got a tree, a slightly lopsided evergreen that Adrian insisted was perfect precisely because of its flaws. Decorating it became an event that involved too much wine, and Lena telling stories about childhood Christmases, while Adrian listened with the kind of attention that made her feel seen in ways she'd never experienced before. On Christmas Eve, after a chaotic dinner at Rachel's, where Adrian had charmed Lena's best friend into complete approval by helping with dishes and asking genuine questions about her work with at-risk youth, they returned home to find the apartment lit only by the tree lights and the city glow through the windows. I have something for you, Adrian said, pulling a small box from his pocket. Lena's heart stopped. The box was too small for anything except... Before you panic, Adrian continued quickly, it's not what you think, or not exactly what you think. Just open it. Inside was a key, not a ring. A key on a simple chain with a small tag that read home. You already live here, Adrian said, but I wanted you to have something that made it official. This is your home now, ours, together. Lena felt tears sting her eyes. Adrian, I love it. I love you. But I'm also going to kill you for making me think you were proposing when we've only been together 4 months. Would that have been so terrible? No, just fast. I can do fast. Adrian's smile was soft, vulnerable in a way she rarely saw. But I can also do patient. However long it takes for you to be ready, I'm not going anywhere. Good, because neither am I. They spent Christmas morning in bed, exchanging gifts, practical things like a new stethoscope for Lena and a leather notebook for Adrian, but also silly things like fuzzy socks and a book of terrible puns. It was perfect in its imperfection, normal in the best possible way. January brought the start of Lena's graduate program, and with it, a new kind of chaos. She balanced work and classes and somehow still found time for Adrian, who adjusted his schedule around hers without being asked. He'd make dinner on nights she had late classes, would quiz her on anatomy while they did dishes, would run out for coffee at midnight when she was drowning in assignments. You don't have to do all this, she told him one February evening when she found him reorganizing her study materials by subject and deadline. I want to. Your success is my success. We're a team, remember? Spring arrived slowly, then all at once. The city thawed, and with it came new cases for Adrian and new challenges for Lena. But they navigated it together, learning each other's rhythms, figuring out how to fight fairly when they disagreed, discovering that love wasn't just the easy moments, but also the hard conversations and the choice to stay, even when walking away would be simpler. By summer, they'd fallen into a pattern that felt like forever. Lena excelled in her graduate program, already being courted by the hospital administration for a future leadership position. Adrian's practice continued to thrive, his reputation for solving impossible problems bringing in clients from across the country. They traveled when they could, a weekend in wine country, a week in Hawaii where Adrian taught Lena to surf, and she taught him that not everything required careful planning. They hosted dinners for Rachel and other friends, built a chosen family out of people who accepted their unconventional situation without judgment. And 1 year and 2 months after the night Lena had walked into a club desperate to feel like she still existed, Adrian brought her back to Meridian. The club looked different in late afternoon light, with the music off and the lights up. Adrian had rented it for the evening, and Lena stood in the entrance confused until she saw what he'd done. The space had been transformed. Soft lighting replaced the strobing chaos. Flowers everywhere, Not wedding flowers, just beautiful arrangements that made the warehouse space feel like a garden. A small stage had been set up where the DJ booth usually lived, with a single microphone and speakers. And in the center of the empty dance floor, Adrian waited. "What is this?" Lena asked, her voice echoing in the space. "This is where we started, where you asked me to dance and I said yes, and both our lives changed." Adrian held out his hand, the same gesture from that first night. "And I wanted to bring you back here for something important." Music started playing. Not club music, but something slow and beautiful that made Lena's throat tight. Adrian led her onto the dance floor, pulled her close, and they moved together just like they had that first time. Except now she knew the feel of his hands, the rhythm of his body, the way he moved like every step was chosen carefully. "I told you I could do patient," Adrian said quietly as they danced, "that I'd wait however long it took for you to be ready, and I have been patient. But Lena, I don't want to wait anymore." He stepped back, and before Lena could process what was happening, he dropped to one knee right there in the middle of the empty club where they'd met. "I love you," Adrian said, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. "I love your courage, and your compassion, and the way you refuse to settle for less than you deserve. I love that you challenged me to be better while accepting me exactly as I am. I love that you see me, all of me, the good and the dangerous and the complicated, and you choose to stay anyway." He pulled out a ring, and this time it wasn't a key. It was a simple band with a single diamond that caught the light like starfire. "I can't promise you a normal life. I can't promise there won't be more people like Victor, more situations that test us, more moments where my world crashes into yours in uncomfortable ways. But I can promise you honesty, partnership, protection without possession, and love that doesn't have limits or conditions or expiration dates." Adrian's smile was soft, vulnerable, absolutely certain. "Lena Carter, will you marry me?" Lena looked down at the man kneeling before her, this dangerous, complicated, deeply good person who'd seen her at her lowest and helped her rebuild herself into someone stronger. Who'd given her back not just her money, but her sense of self-worth, her belief that she deserved to be valued and protected and loved without reservation. She thought about the woman she'd been a year ago, broken, invisible, eating cereal for dinner and wondering if this was all her life would ever be. And she thought about the woman she was now, confident, challenged, building a future she'd thought was lost forever. All because she'd made one reckless choice to ask a stranger to dance. "Yes," she said, the word coming out fierce and certain and full of joy. "Yes, I'll marry you. Yes to all of it, the complications and the danger and the life we're building together. Yes." Adrian stood, slid the ring onto her finger, and kissed her like they were the only two people in the world. When they finally broke apart, both laughing and crying, the song changed to something with a stronger beat. "We should celebrate," Adrian said. "I have champagne, and Mrs. Nguyen is bringing food, and Rachel's waiting outside with about 20 other people who want to congratulate you." "You planned a party?" "I planned a proposal. The party was Rachel's idea. She threatened me with bodily harm if I didn't let her be involved." Adrian's expression was amused and fond. "Your best friend is terrifying, by the way. I like her." They spent the evening surrounded by friends, dancing in the same space where they'd started, making promises about the future while honoring the journey that had brought them here. Rachel cried and claimed she'd known all along they were perfect for each other. Mrs. Nguyen brought enough food to feed an army and told Adrian in rapid Vietnamese that he'd better treat Lena right, or answer to her. As the night wound down and people started to leave, Lena and Adrian found themselves alone on the dance floor one more time. The music had been turned down to background noise, the lights dimmed to something romantic instead of practical. "Thank you," Lena said quietly, her head on his shoulder. "For what?" "For saying yes that first night, for seeing me when I felt invisible, for helping me remember that I'm allowed to want more than just survival." She pulled back to look at him. "For loving me in a way that makes me braver instead of smaller." "You did all the brave parts yourself," Adrian replied. "I just provided the opportunity and the leverage when needed." "My dangerous fiancé." "Your dangerous fiancé, who is completely at your mercy." He kissed her forehead, gentle and grounding. "You know that, right? That you have more power over me than anyone ever has? That I would burn down the world to keep you safe?" "I know, but I'd rather we just built something together instead." "That works too." They swayed together in comfortable silence, and Lena thought about everything that had led to this moment. The broken marriage, the stolen money, the desperate decision to approach a stranger, the fear and risk and gradual understanding that sometimes the things that scare us most are also the things that save us. She'd asked Adrian to dance so her ex-husband would see her, would know she still existed, but what she'd found instead was someone who made her feel more real and alive than she'd ever felt before. Someone who matched her strength instead of diminishing it, who protected without controlling, who loved without limits. What started as one reckless moment in a downtown club had become the foundation of the life she'd always wanted but never knew how to ask for. And standing here in his arms, wearing his ring, planning a future they'd build together on their own terms, Lena finally understood what it meant to be truly seen, not as a victim or a survivor or someone who needed saving, but as a partner, an equal, someone worthy of a love that didn't compromise or apologize or play it safe. The music faded to silence, but they kept dancing, held in the certainty that whatever came next, challenges or dangers or simple everyday moments, they would face it together. Not because it was easy, but because they'd chosen each other consciously, repeatedly, with full knowledge of what that choice meant. And that made all the difference. Outside, the city continued its endless rhythm. Inside Meridian, in the space where everything had changed, Lena and Adrian danced alone in the soft light, building their forever one moment at a time. This was how the story ended, not with a rescue or a fairy tale, but with two people who'd found each other in the darkness and chosen to build something beautiful from the wreckage of their pasts, with partnership instead of possession, with honesty instead of illusion, with love that was complicated and real and absolutely worth fighting for. And when they finally left the club in the early hours of morning, walking out into the city that had witnessed their beginning, Lena looked back one last time at the place where her life had split into before and after, where she'd stopped surviving and started living, where a stranger had taken her hand and everything had changed. "Ready to go home?" Adrian asked, his arm around her shoulders. Lena smiled, leaned into him, felt the weight of the ring on her finger and the lightness in her chest. "Ready," she said. "Let's go home." And they did.